Good morning. Welcome to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting, Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And welcome, Commissioner DeBone. I see you up there in your office. Thank you.
I'm here. I'm ready to participate.
Wonderful. Okay. I do not believe we have any citizen input this morning. I do want to make the announcement that the governor is having a press conference this morning at 11 a.m. We will adjourn our meeting to watch that press conference at 11 a.m. So please know that. I believe she had met with OHA Monday afternoon, and so I'm sure there'll be several things that she'll be bringing up that will be applicable for Deschutes County at that moment. We have a consent agenda.
So I wanted to talk about an amendment to, it's item number 1. I've talked about it with the health department already, but I'd like to pull that. And then there's one set of minutes that I need to ask about whether we need to change something. So number 14. So I'd pull item 1 and 14 from the agenda. Otherwise, it's all approvable by me.
Okay, so is that a motion?
So yeah, it can be. I'll move approval of the consent agenda, items 2 through 13 and 15 through 18.
Is there a second?
I'll second it and then a little discussion.
Okay.
So item number 2 and 5 is the vacating a portion of Cook Avenue. Just a clarification request, is that the same item repeated or is that 2 different steps in a process? And
Okay, that would be from Cody.
Those are,
Tom,
we can-
I think
Oh, Tom?
those are 2 separate steps.
Two separate.
Yep, and that's all I needed to know. Okay.
Okay.
And then item number 18 is the minutes from July 6th. There's just a mention of Deschutes Labor, LABOR Collaborative, and I'm thinking that probably wasn't the right words. So either we can pull those minutes or just acknowledge that it's possibly something else and fix it after.
Okay. All right.
Is it maybe, say what it says now?
It says Deschutes Labor Collaborative. And this was a note just under other items. Commissioner Henderson, you must have updated something, and it just
Maybe it's
says,
the Deschutes Basin Water Collaborative.
yeah. So as I
Might
say,
be
it's
it.
just
Yeah, that's probably what I was updating.
so with that acknowledgement, we can just pass the minutes and correct it.
Okay.
So I could look at it. Could have been the Forest Collaborative, I guess, but,
Why don't we clarify that
all right.
later? All
Sounds
right.
good.
Commissioner Henderson,
How about yes?
Commissioner DeBone,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. And I do want to acknowledge the people that are serving on our ambulance service area advisory committee for being reappointed. That's a pretty amazing committee to be on. It's always critical. Jerry Thackeray, Jeremy Ast, and Dan Doherty. And last year when I had my meeting with the ambulance director in July, I was made aware that we didn't have a hospital bed in Deschutes County, in Boise, and in Portland, with the exception of a few beds in Emmanuel, Legacy Emmanuel. So that was summer of 2019, and apparently a lot of people would love to go back to the summer of 2019. But we didn't have any beds at that time. So please, when you're outdoors recreating, please be safe.
And also, I wanted to call attention to one of the, two of the resolutions here that we did in the consent have to do with funding for different parts of the health department. One is with regard to the new program from federal funding. It was a grant we won, so we finally have the resolution amending the budget. And then the other one is with regard to funding we got from a state agency criminal justice commission to fund the stabilization center which we've talked about at prior meetings, but just repeating that again. So we've got funding to have a full staff there 24/7, which has been a goal of that program. So I hope we can keep it full, but that's been something that's been questioned, whether we did enough funding, but that was that grant that does that, so. Those are just my comments on those.
Okay, so therefore we should go to item number,
We do one. Is it
yes,
actually? Yeah.
the one, the financing for 541,000.
Yeah. So I don't know if each of you got the same explanation or got the charts that the health department had done. Have you both seen those? Or there was some charts showing the org chart, because this was kind of confusing looking at the numbers in the proposal. And as going through it, this is a funding, again, a third grant, really, we've gotten from the state for funding with regard to COVID. And I think I'm fine with the funding, except I think the commitment, I've been convinced that having an administrative assistant, limited duration is a valuable thing, given the increasing demands and really the uncertainty immediately. But it's the only one of the positions that was actually an 18-month. And I'm in favor of moving that back to a fiscal year 21 or a 12-month commitment. So it's in sync with the other limited durations. I'm sure if we need it, we can authorize further revenues at that time, but that would be my proposal to amend that in that way.
Commissioner DeBonne, do you have any comment?
I support that position and all this work that's going to be happening in support of COVID. So I'm not opposed to the 18-month duration on this one.
Do you want me to explain why I think it, or do you want to say what you think, or?
No, go ahead.
So this, I guess I'll just say, Commissioner Bone, why I'm in favor of it is I think, this is, as we discussed before, there may be a need for administrative assistant in that department, but I think we have to be prudent about where we add administrative assistants long-term, and 18 months seems like a longer-term commitment. And we're hiring quite a few people related to COVID that we may end up having to let go at some point. And I'm just concerned about this growing into a permanent position when we haven't needed one in that department. And then I also am concerned with the precedence value of, well, if that department needs it, then does everybody need an administrative assistant? What's the growth to the county on that? And so that's why I think the 12 months is still a long time. I mean, 12 months from now is, twice as long as we've been dealing with the COVID issues now, and it's a real pessimistic view of what is going to happen. So that's why I would rather put it in sync and deal with it a year from now with budgets, because that seems to me that's the underlying push here would be to get that. So.
Well, and I think this is going to be a community transition to environmental and public health efforts that people are going to appreciate for a long time. So that's why I think of this. I mean, it is the expansion of services in the health department, but it's in a very critical time of need. This is a grant provided by the state for this purpose, and it doesn't seem out of place.
So are you supporting then, Commissioner Henderson, putting the 12-month?
No, he's
Not specifically, no.
You think 18 months?
Yeah, leaving it the way it is.
Okay. Well, I know that the public health department has been working, 8 days a week, dealing with their contact tracing. I know that I do talk to our director. I'll talk to him on the weekend. A lot of weekends, finding out what's going on I'm sure that the paperwork is overwhelming at this time. I think that the fact that we have the 541,000 designated from the legislature for COVID, it's something that we have to, we've got to stay on top
But
of.
why couldn't we use it for more contact tracers? Take that same 6-month salary and put it in a limited duration for another employee that actually is on the ground. That they are saying now they need more of that. We saw the tables yesterday. So I guess my point is that rather than a longer commitment for administrative assistant, why don't we make if we've got that extra money, we chose how we allotted the money. And, we're putting a lot to contact tracers. But why not use it there rather than this? It's the only part of this program that goes beyond the 12 months. And that's, I guess, my point. I don't mind using the money we're getting, but I just think we should look at.
Well, I know that Heather Keisner said yesterday she was going to be hiring temporary workers to cover the weekends. So I'm not sure where they're.
Well, that's in the contract. That's the
Right.
228,000 or whatever it is. I can't read it.
For the weekend. So, I mean,
It's it's a contracting agency of 229,874. So they are hiring part-time things, but I just would rather have somebody more on the ground than an extension of one contract. None of the others, based on the things we gave us yesterday, are for that. Go to 18 months. So I don't understand. I mean, I guess that's what I'm raising it.
no, I would agree with you that it could be for 12 months. And allocate more funding for the contact tracers.
And I proposed that when I talked with Hillary and Nahad yesterday, that
Uh-huh.
I'd be in favor of something like that, and they said we could make a change at this meeting.
Okay.
If-
All right.
I don't know how we amend it, Tom, but maybe.
So.
I guess there'd be an amendment in the resolution, administrative assistant 12 months from hire date, which is what the other ones are at the second page of the resolution.
That's correct. That would be the only change. We can put that, make that a 12 instead of an 18 on page 2 of the resolution. And I think that would, because it's not detailed or broken out on the table on page 3. So, and
Yeah.
that one change would cover it. And then we'll note that in the system. I mean, it's still going to be an admin assistant, limited duration in the personnel system for FY21, and we'll just move up the deadline to 6/30/21 instead of 12/31/21. It'll be reviewed at the same time and along with any other limited durations whose deadline is coming up at that point.
But you really wouldn't do 6:30 though, because if they're not going to be able to hire him now, if you're going to say 12 months, then wouldn't you have to do like 8:30? It's probably going to take them a bit of time to get someone hired.
Yeah, I think we peg our limited durations based on the position, not necessarily the hire date. So it would, I'm not sure on that. I'd have to check with HR, but it will cover 12 months worth of salary.
Okay.
And I think the other change would maybe be on the table on page 3. The money would be moved by amendment from the salary number, line item 1, and maybe down to contingency, whatever that amount is. It's not, it's a third of one salary.
Well, but that, it'd still be the same 12 months.
Yeah, I'm just saying instead of 18 months, there probably is 18 months of salary built into that table on page 3.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there is, because
Oh.
the resolution only covers FY21, so that additional 6 months would be in FY22, which would be carryover in the contingency that
Oh,
we would
okay.
have to reprogram as part of
Okay.
the FY22 budget.
Okay. All right.
Any further discussion? So I second the motion. So Commissioner Henderson,
Vote yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
I'll vote yes.
and the chair votes yes.
So, yeah, I'm not opposed to hiring these people. It was just that change, so we're all
Okay,
set.
great. Thank you so much. All right. So Zachariah, are you available?
Yes, good morning, commissioners. Bear with me for a second as I share my screen here. And I'll go through the formality. For the record, Zechariah Heck, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. All right, can you all see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Looks like it. All right. And just for clarification, I provided an email to you all with a copy of this and a hard copy in the Barnes and Sawyer room as well, so to follow along. Today's topic I'm here to help facilitate is a public hearing on amendments to the Historic Preservation Ordinance. That's our comprises our comprehensive plan as well as Deschutes County Code 2.28. Chair Adair, when you are ready and have the legislative script in front of you, I'll go through that.
I have it.
That statement. All right. So, and for those of us watching online, thanks for your patience. This is kind of a long script, but I'll try to be quick on it. This is the time and place set for hearing on file numbers 247, 20-253PA, and 254TA concerning amendments to the Comprehensive Plan and the Historic Preservation Ordinance, Deschutes County Code, Chapter 2.28, in order to comply with updates to applicable Oregon administrative rules and the state model ordinance. Board of County Commissioners will hear oral testimony, receive written testimony, and consider the testimony submitted at this hearing. Due to COVID-19, the hearing will be conducted remotely via Zoom as well as in person. The board and staff will be panelists, and the public will be attendees and will have their microphones muted until raised to panelist status by the chair. The process will be as follows. Staff, which in this case is the applicant, will give a brief report. For the public participating by video, staff will announce the name of the person to be elevated to panelist and unmuted to provide their testimony, then be returned to attendee status with microphone muted. For the public members participating by telephone, staff will announce the last four numbers of the phone number and ask if the person wishes to provide testimony. The person will be elevated to panelist and unmuted and respond yes or no if they wish to provide testimony. The hearing is being recorded. The board may make a decision on this matter today, continue the public hearing to a date certain, or leave the written record open for a specified period of time. Questions to and from the chair may be entertained at any time at the chair's discretion by using the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Cross-examination of people testifying will not be allowed. However, if any person wishes to ask a question of another person during that person's testimony, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. The chair is free to decide whether or not to ask such questions of the person testifying. Prior to the commencement of the hearing, any party may challenge the qualifications of any commissioner for a conflict of interest by using the raise your hand feature in Zoom. This challenge must be documented with specific reasons supported by facts. Should any commissioner be challenged, the member may disqualify himself or herself, withdraw from the hearing, or make a statement on the record of their capacity to hear and decide on this issue. At this time, do any members of the board need to set forth any information that may be perceived as a conflict of interest?
Does any commissioner have anything to disclose? And if so, please state the nature of same and whether you can proceed.
I have none.
Commissioner DeBonne?
This is Commissioner DeBonne. So just the history of being in office while National Register application for the Pilot Butte Canal was put in place, which I had opposed at the time. So this is kind of a follow-on update of the code. So, and we'll talk about that during this process. So it's not a direct conflict personally or anything, just some history.
Okay, thank you, and I have none to disclose.
Great, thank you. Does any party wish to challenge any commissioner based on conflicts of interest? And again, this is where you would use your raise your hand feature if you're participating by Zoom.
As no challenges are presented, we don't see any, do we, Stephanie? Prior to opening the hearing, does anyone have any procedural objections to the public hearing? Any procedural? Anybody raise their hand? Seeing none, the public hearing is now open. Staff will proceed with a brief staff report.
Thank you, Chair Adair. All right, I'll provide a quick background on how we got here. So in 2017, the State Department of Land Conservation and Development identified a need to update the Oregon administrative rules pertaining to Goal 5 historic resources. The updates include new and amended definitions, clear distinction between procedural steps, and more detail regarding a review of applications to demolish or relocate National Register resources. These amendments to the OARs were adopted in February 2017. In April of 2019, Deschutes County received a grant, a certified local government grant, approving the county's proposal to align our county code, the Historic Preservation Ordinance, in alignment with the said 2017 OAR amendments. In 2019, the State Historic Preservation Office, in coordination with DLCD, developed a model ordinance that reflects the 2017 OARs in a form for local jurisdictions to use in updating their own historic preservation ordinance. So in early 2020, staff coordinated with SHPO to reflect or to do an audit of our code and identify areas that needed to be updated and bring our code, which was last updated in 2012, up to the current definitions and procedures. The Historic Landmarks Commission held a hearing on June 1st of this year. Staff did send notice, not only as required in the Bend Bulletin, but also to all property owners of historic landmarks. During the June 1st hearing, there were 2 members of the public attended, representing one family, the Grunns, that own a portion of the Central Oregon Canal. I will share that they asked for increased protections generally for historic landmarks, and staff, in coordination with SHPO, responded or shared that these amendments, as proposed today, are simply to align county code with the state rules, and encourage the Grunns to provide testimony, which they did, to the board concerning CDD's work plan, if there's an interest in perhaps applying future CLG grant funds to a further audit or consideration of how to expand protections broadly to historic landmarks, which they seem to be satisfied with. On June 15th, the Historic Landmarks Commission held deliberations and ultimately recommended approval to the board unanimously of the proposed amendments in front of you today. Following our procedures ordinance, the Planning Commission also reviewed the amendments and raised no serious concerns or questions with the amendments. All right, so a quick summary of the county amendments. And I will note that in your packet page, I believe beginning on page 60, you will have a summary table of the amendments, as well as the complete ordinance and exhibits identifying the amendments and track changes, strike out areas to be deleted and underline areas to be added. So The majority of the edits pertain to adding and clarifying definitions and updating text to reflect new terminology. This created a ripple effect throughout the Historic Preservation Ordinance where new words needed to be updated in every section. So you'll see in the actual exhibits to the ordinance, every section has some sort of amendment. There's a lot of red in these amendments. That said, they are quite limited in the scope of the amendments. Again, we added definitions and we clarified procedures. One thing to note, one of the more significant changes, again, in alignment with state code, is clarifying procedures between National Register resources, so those properties and landmarks that go through the state and federal process to an application to list said resource on the National Register of Historic Properties versus our local process to list a resource on our Goal 5 locally significant historic resources. 2017 OER amendments specify the difference in the process to go about each of those applications and nominations, as well as corresponding requirements for alterations or demolitions of those resources in each category. Again, so to clarify and build off that statement, as directed by the state, National Register resources listed before February 23rd, 2017, which was the date of the OIRs becoming effective, need to go through a separate process. So alterations to those resources are not required to go through a local review unless the county decides to take that National Register resource and bring it into our local code. However, demolition and relocation proposals of those resources are still required to be reviewed by the HLC and the county. I want to clarify, as this is really important, and there was some initial confusion on this, is that state rule applies with these amendments regardless if these proposed amendments are approved or not. They are the rule of the land today. That said, there are a few discretionary amendments that I want to cover to make sure the board understands where you as our policy-making body can have more discretion in how our county code reads and is implemented. So beginning with deleting the secretary position, this is deemed as an unnecessary position by CDD staff. CDD staff supports the Historic Landmarks Commission, and so there's really no need for an administrative official in the HLC. So we have proposed to delete that position. The chair and vice chair positions still remain in code for the Historic Landmarks Commission. We also added a definition of integrity as recommended by SHPO, simply to add clarification as it's used throughout the code as well. We deleted the special assessment section, also recommended by SHPO, as the Oregon Revised Statutes specifically provides detail on the tax allowances and benefits of the Historic Preservation Program in Oregon. We amended the applicability clause simply to reflect new terminology, and you'll see that again throughout the code where we changed text or terminology based on new definitions. But to be transparent, that is a specific section where the Board of County Commissioners could definitely modify the proposed amendments in the applicability clause. We did delete the appeals process. not required by the state or in the model ordinance, but in coordination with our current planning staff, we really determine it's not necessary to have that text because it's already provided in Title 22, our procedures ordinance. The amendments do propose a slight modification of archaeological resources that's described in subsection 140. That I did work with a state archaeologist from SHPO to really get a good understanding of the role the county plays in reviewing protection of archaeological resources. So that proposal in the amendments, I feel like reflects the best practices, as well as being mindful of not overreaching what role the county has in the overarching state process. And then for readability, I pulled the condemnation proceedings out of one section and created it in its own separate section just to clarify what that process is. And then lastly, components of the removal of historic resource from resource list. That is new section 180. Not all steps are required in the model ordinance, but they are suggested. So as proposed, we provided them all in the proposed amendments. But if interested, we can go through and describe which ones are required versus which ones are not.
So I have a quick question. You're saying that these are discretionary, and I'm looking through the actual code. So when you say archaeological resources is a discretionary amendment, are you talking about the definitions or how they're applied, or both?
In terms of discretionary, the discretionary portion of them specific to the archaeological definitions or discussions, from my recollection, the definition is required. That is a specific provided language in the model ordinance, and in the OER. However, the subsection in the code itself, 2.28.140, archaeological resources, is discretionary. So we could modify that if interested by the board.
So can you direct me when you're to a specific code provision again?
Yeah. So I will exit out of my PowerPoint right now and find that section for you.
I mean, it's quite an expansion. They've gone from, any part, structure, or portion of a structure or building to objects, which can include monuments, symbols, tools, facilities, technological byproducts, and dietary byproducts. That's pretty wide. I've got a apple box maker that my dad used in the 30s and 40s to make apple boxes in Hood River. I guess that it meets this timeline, and it is kind of historic. That's how they used to do all their fruit in the 20s and 30s and 40s.
Yeah, and good question, Commissioner Henderson. I will note two things. One, first, that I understand SHPO staff are on the Zoom call and can answer any questions. This is definitely, you're touching on a subject that is probably good to get SHPO's response to. They are definitely the experts, and we look to them to help us understand state rules for historic and archaeological resource protections. I misquoted the section that that is a new section, and that's section 2.28.170 on packet page 99.
Yes.
So preservation of archaeological resources, and this is new text that that basically refers to applicable Oregon revised statutes, and then recognizes that a person may not excavate, injure, or destroy or alter an archaeological resource per the definition or as recognized or defined by the state. And there's we could spend a lot of time discussing archaeological resources and the protections provided by the state. I won't even begin to pretend that I know the full process or protections provided. It's something that the county doesn't even have a list of these resources or where they're located. It's something protected by the state. And they have their specific OARs as cited in this section that govern the protection of these resources and what the county can and cannot do in terms of modifying those protections or reviewing those protections.
Chair Adair, Nick Lelak, Deschutes County Community Development Director. Zach, one of the things that might be helpful as I read this, and certainly it's good to get SHPO's perspective, but I don't recall what part of this is discretionary. I thought this was all conforming to OAR. That's one of the parts that I don't recall.
PowerPoint lists 3 sections, but
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can, I know generally when I was reviewing these codes to identify what was discretionary or not, I flagged this section as discretionary. And I recall that the reason being is that our current code discusses protection of archaeological resources, but not according to the state archaeologist, not the most current revised statutes or process. And we had a discussion about, well, do we, is some jurisdictions expand the process? I wanted to make sure that ours was limited in that protection to really just follow what is required in state rules. So with that said, by going through this presentation and having just one screen open here, if I can come back to this topic and provide a look at the model ordinance and specify what the model ordinance requires, as well as the OER, I can answer this question as well. And I do think SHPO will have some insight onto this question as well.
Okay, thank you, Jack.
Yeah, is that all right to move on?
Yes, why don't you do that, and then we can come back.
Okay. Thank you. So yeah, that covers the discretionary amendments. And again, I will come back to that specific one on archaeological resources. In moving on, again, in bright red text, just want to clarify that these updates are in line with the 2017 OER amendments and the 2019 model ordinance. SHPO, as I mentioned, is on the Zoom call to speak to this effort and answer any questions. They did provide testimony to the record stating that as they've reviewed, these amendments are in line with the model ordinance, and they have no concerns with the proposed amendments. Next steps, of course, we can continue the hearing to a date certain, close the oral record, or keep the written record open to a date certain, or if the board is ready at the end of the hearing, close the record and begin deliberations. So with that, I would ask that we move to public comments and see if SHPO is on the line and available to be elevated to a panelist, and I will get back to you on the archaeological resource question that Commissioner Henderson had.
So, and another thing, Zach, on the page before this last one, you have about all the updates are in line with 2017 amendments, and model ordinance. So what is the obligation of the county? I mean, we do this a lot where we put things in line with state or rules, but is there something that mandates we do that? That's, are we doing it, I mean, and
Yeah, good.
and that kind of
good
ties
question.
into the discretionary part, but what happens if we don't, I guess is what I'm wondering, and so.
Yeah, thanks for that question.
Harder
And
and
happy,
all. So,
exactly, happy to provide more detail on that. And again, this is another great area to get SHPO's responses. They help CLGs and historic landmarks commissions go through this process. But my understanding is state rule applies right now, the OERs that were amended in 2017, and our county code doesn't reflect the most current process. And so if a property owner in Deschutes County were to read our code, which is, from my experience, probably what is the most likely thing to happen. Our code is perhaps more, they know to reach out to our code, review whatever question they might have in our code. It would not necessarily reflect what is required from the state. And so this is almost a housekeeping amendment where we need to, it's important for us to convey what the actual requirements are from the state. We are not, from my understanding, required to provide an update or update our code to align with state code. We could just simply say, state, there's some difference here between local code and state code. So refer our constituents to state code. However, it's just understood as best practice to keep our code current and mirror what the requirements and processes are for state, what they are in the state rules.
Zachariah, I do want to note at this moment that it's been 8 years since Deschutes County has updated their code. So, I think that's important that we, 8 years is quite a long period of time, and I think it's important that we do keep on track with the changes that are required. For those that didn't realize that they really should have looked at the state code and not ours, if it's, been 8 years. I mean, it's excellent that your department has done that at this time, so.
Chair Adair, I would say thank you, and we really appreciate the state funding, keeping our code in compliance and conforming with state rules. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes the state changes it, and it's up to local jurisdictions to do it on their own. But this is one of those where SHPO's really been a great partner and funded this effort.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Commissioner DeBonne, did you have any comments at this moment?
No comments at this time.
Okay. Zachariah, are they available now to answer Commissioner Henderson's question?
Yes, Curry Gill is.
Okay.
Yes. So I don't know if I can, Curry Gill and Robert Olguin could be elevated here. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess for our SHPO people that are going to join us, I want to thank them. So remember that just the one scenario that I had seen as a commissioner was the canal. This should be a partnership. You know, when we talk about a historic preservation, a resource of the past, we want to celebrate what used to be, what it used to look like, or how things work differently. There was just that point in time where there was an application against the will of the operator owner of the canal, and they were just asking for the timing because they were doing other analysis. So as I say, if Deschutes County asked to stand by what we saw as an application go from Deschutes County to SHPO to the federal government, and I asked SHPO specifically about, well, what about an opposition letter from the governing body asking to stand by? And they said, well, our job was to, you know, acknowledge the application and send it along. So that was my one scenario. I'm wondering if there's any changes at the state level. And, you know, our code does document that the governing body is the approval body here. But as I say, even when we thought that was the case in the past, the system didn't respond like that.
So, Zachariah, is Mr. Gill available then for comment?
Yeah, both Curry and Robert are in the Zoom meeting, and we can pass it off to them. I think they were just waiting to
Okay,
make sure it's their time to go.
all right. So, Stephanie, can we let,
This is Curry Gill. I have access now.
oh, good, thank you.
So this is Curry Gill. I'm with the State Historic Preservation Office. Our office is in Salem. And thanks for inviting us to be part of the meeting and hopefully provide some insight. I noted I have the last canal question. I noted the question about the requirement of putting your ordinance in line with state rules. There was a question before that I might have missed noting.
I think it was regarding the preservation of archaeological resources.
Archaeology. Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'll just start with the first and move forward through there. So related to the archaeological resources, as a certified local government to maintain that certified local government status and have access to the funds, the county is required to include archaeology as part of their process, and that is indicated in the model ordinance. And what is in the model ordinance is based off of ensuring that the state laws are addressed. So that's where that definition and language comes from, because we wanted to make sure if you're doing it as a county that you're meeting the state requirements as well. Does that answer that first question about the archaeology?
Commissioner Henderson?
Yeah. Good morning. Thanks for being available today. I guess what I'm really asking, because we don't deal with this very often, we've only dealt with once since I've been here, in terms of, or twice, I think, maybe. Anyway, I was just interested in what it looks like it's an expanded definition, and so it doesn't, than what used to be there, that you're replacing what you're now calling archaeological objects, archaeological resources, archaeological sites weren't in the original definition. Maybe they were somewhere else and I missed it. But anyway, I'm just trying to see what, and then do we just is that just the definition now that's in place around the state, that's the only option, and I guess I'm just looking for some clarity on that. And then I don't know if you answered the question we'd asked. Zachariah was really, he said that some of it was discretionary, and I'm not sure what part's discretionary.
Well, I will say that the definition comes from the state statutes around archaeology. So that's where that definition has been pulled.
But I guess what I'm asking, if we've been using that same definition for the last 30 years, or is this a new, it looks maybe, or a newer, broader definition of what might be preserved?
The state definition has not changed in many years. I don't know the history of the definition in your local code or how that came to be. So this is not addressing a recent, unlike the Goal 5 for historic properties, they had that rule change that went into effect in 2017. So those parts are being addressed because the state changed it. I think the definition in the Deschutes County Code for archaeology is being changed just to come in line with the state, but the state has not recently changed that definition. Does that provide the clarification you're looking for?
I could probably jump in, sorry, and add to Curry's statement there. I'm confirming where I previously flagged that a portion of our amendments pertaining to archaeology are discretionary. What I've seen so far is that the definitions in section 2.28170 mirror OERs and the model ordinance, which confirms what Curry is saying, is that those amendments are specific to what the state requires. But it does appear that is a new section. So what I'm thinking is that our code didn't necessarily have that specification in our local ordinance previously.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, because what I'm trying to understand is, we could just agree to all this and go to the next item, but I'm aware of how this impacts people's decision-making when things get named as historical sites, and it seems like I used the example kind of half-jokingly about the box-making machine in my dad's garage, but there's all sorts of things that are older than 75 years. 75, Curry, you weren't on our last deal, but 75 years is only 10 years older than me, so it's not very historic in my view of what is worth saving for, the rest of eternity. So I just, we have a barn in our family, it's 120 years old, and that's, the same barn that my great-great-grandfather built. So I just wonder when things become historic and how much stuff we say is historic just because it was the first thing here. And Deschutes County is different than the Willamette Valley because we're the last county incorporated, and this area was the last area settled in the state, really, because they couldn't get here very easily over the mountains or to the plateau with the Deschutes River. They just couldn't get here. So it's not very old here, is what I'm saying. And so I see what we're calling old, but it's not very old in my view. So I'm just kind of trying to see what's discretionary, or what is there any, as we say in the business, decision space that is discretionary to us, or or does state law trump it anyway, so it doesn't really matter other than we now inform people. They can look at our rules and see what the rules are, but they're really state rules. That's a long way of asking the question, but that's what's on my mind, because it can stop. I know places where they'll have to spend a year doing a study of something, and it affects the future of an area somewhat. And I treasure old things, but I don't know.
Sure. So I am not an expert in the state archaeology laws, for sure. I do know that Zechariah talked with the state archaeologist about this. That definition does apply across the state, so that is what is being used to to apply those state laws, the statutes that exist. I will say that 75 years is sort of the starting point, and that does not necessarily mean that it will be an archaeological site or a historically designated item or place. So that's sort of the beginning point. And also, it's 75 years of not being used for its use. So your example of a barn, or I work with cemeteries a lot, and if they're a functioning, ongoing cemetery that's older than 75 years, then they're a functioning cemetery. They haven't been not in use for that purpose for that long, so that can come into play. So there are a lot of things that come into play with how these get applied. So that's the marker point to start a process that could be lengthy or might not be lengthy, but that is the starting point. And so it is state law, and people are supposed to follow the archaeological laws. And if you're going to have this, I mean, as a county, those are laws that the county is required to follow. If you're going to have a code for people to understand the historic and archaeological resources, it's much more helpful, as Zechariah pointed out, to have them have all of the correct and accurate information in your local ordinance, because then they have one place to go to find that information.
Curry, I just have a question. When you brought up cemeteries, if there was a cemetery that was used in like the 1880s, is that automatically, and it's no longer used, is that automatically, is that a historic spot that's been designated?
Well, so there's a process. It has to be, for archaeological sites, it has to be known sites, so it has to be documented. There is a historic cemeteries designation. The information has to be submitted to the state, so and that can be submitted by anybody. And then there's National Register designation, which has the longer National Register process, which some of you are already familiar with. And then there's local designation, that it could happen on the local level. So none of these things are automatic. But if that cemetery, say somebody discovered this cemetery, they got land and they're gonna build a housing development. This happens all the time. And they discover there's a little family cemetery on there and it hasn't been used for 75 years, then that would trigger a process under the archaeology laws. If it had been documented as a historic cemetery, that would trigger the historic cemetery ones, and so on. So that's sort of how the process would work.
Thank you for that quick analysis.
Chair Adair?
Yes.
Can I just ask one question? So, Curry, just to close the loop on this, is there anything that you see in the definitions or in the 2.28.170 where there is decision space to ask that question that Commissioner Henderson asked? Or do those two sections very clearly implement state law, be it statute or OAR?
From our perspective, they implement state law.
And thank you, Curry, and Nick, thanks for asking that question and clarifying. I apologize for getting my wires crossed earlier. I referenced the wrong section. So where there is discretion, in my opinion, in my review of the state's requirements and our code, or at least how we phrase our code, the specific section is 2.28.140 subsection C, which is packet page 98. And it's the text in there that is a slight modification of what is in place today for the process regarding cultural or archaeological resources. Based on, again, this conversation I had with the state archaeologist, he felt like this was an appropriate modification to reflect the nuance of county review of archaeological resources. So I can read it out loud if necessary, but I added as a proposed amendment a modification to that 2.28140 subsection C.
So is all of that your offered amendment, or just part of the wording there? We're looking at it here, so you could read what you added, is what I heard you say.
Yep. So actually, none of those amendments in red underlined text is necessarily required by the state. It was recommended by the state archaeologist, as this is what he thought was appropriate and certainly doesn't go beyond the requirements. It keeps it very minimal, but reflects the process. So there's that that clarification there of if a local review is necessary, as determined by the state archaeologist in the preceding sentence, Deschutes County shall follow sections 2.28090 and 100, depending on the nature of the request. And again, so it's if we come up with an archaeological resource that the county needs to provide comments on, it's just providing a little more structure to the process, other than what is previously in code, which is, in my opinion, very ambiguous. And so it just provides a little more direction, but that is the specific section that is discretionary and up for the county commissioners to determine if you're okay with that amendment or not, if you just want to keep it as is. Sorry for the miscommunication or confusion earlier.
All right. Are there any further questions?
So I had the one regarding.
Good morning, everyone.
Sorry,
Thank
this
you
is
all
Curry
so much
Gill.
for joining us today.
Regarding
I want to take a moment to
Curry?
thank everyone who's sending me homemade masks.
Okay. Curry, is it possible to come back in a few minutes? We were going to watch the governor's press conference at this moment in time, and it's just now starting. Or do you have a quick minute answer?
You can go ahead.
Okay, so we will adjourn our meeting for the press conference, and then we'll be back. Thank you. The press conference has started. From the governor's press conference, and the new rules that will be applicable this Friday, the 24th. She said face coverings for 5 and older. Bars, restaurants will be closing at 10 p.m. and indoor will be reduced from 250 to 100, such as indoor bars, churches, restaurants, gyms, etc. So anyway, it's all going to take into effect this Friday. And they're also considering travel restrictions for people coming from hotspots, quarantining people. So it's like if you go to Hawaii, but that's either on a boat or a plane, you have to go into quarantine for 14 days. So she's working with the neighboring states on those issues. So Zachariah, back to you and our public hearing.
Sounds good, Commissioners. So let's see. It looks like Robert Olguin from SHPO is still on the line. Looks like Curry had to leave, but I hope my clarification on where the discretion is for the archaeological resources has been clarified. It's just that one sentence in section 140 of the Preservation Code.
Item C, correct?
Item C, yes, exactly.
Okay.
With that said, there's, that's sort of in my humble opinion, that's the extent of the discretionary amendments are to that effect. Readability, making sure things are clarified, of course, deletion of that secretary position, but everything else is in line with the state requirements. And again, they apply today, whether these amendments are passed or not. The last thing I'll mention is we received 1 or 2 public comments that related to this topic, but honestly, we're better suited for a broader discussion about expanding protections, not necessarily these specific amendments coming into compliance, county code in compliance with state rule. So the board's discretion at this point, if you want to keep the hearing open or...
I do want to check and see if we have any parties. Stephanie, did we have any parties on Zoom earlier? No, there have been no parties on Zoom nor on the phone? Okay, all right. So, because it's pretty difficult for the public to make comments at this point in time. But and thank you for reminding us that there were 2, I believe, Bend residents that were asking for more assistance in protection. Isn't that what you said?
Yeah, they live off the Central Oregon Canal.
Okay, thank you.
I think they were some of the leaders in the, when we were considering changing that, there was a debate whether that was going to continue to stay open, water or not. And I think they were a couple of the leaders in that effort to keep it open.
Right.
It seems like that's who showed us the property or something when we went out to look at it.
Exactly.
It was from what, 1904 or something, the canals?
I think so.
The canals, yeah.
I know it was over 100 years ago. Okay, so at this point in time, then, being no comments for the public hearing, I want to close the public hearing. Do we want to keep the oral record open? We haven't really had any comments, have we?
No comments. The only comments from the public that staff has received were provided in your meeting packet on Monday as part of the full record. And that's the extent of the formal public comments we have received. There was, I'll share, there was some general interest about the amendments early on. I had several phone calls, but once I explained the reason for the amendments, nobody commented formally with concerns or what have you beyond what the Gruns submitted.
Now, when did the state actually ask us to do this? At what point did they grant us the money, the funding for this?
And the CLG grant was approved in April of 2019. And I think that, yeah, that's when the grant was issued. But just a quick clarification, the state, I believe, certainly encourages us to do this, but it's not necessarily required. Just best practice.
Right, and Chair Adair, we applied, we included this project in our CLG grant application. In that round, we had anticipated conducting another phase of a sister's historic resources inventory, but the city at that time was not prepared to move forward with a more detailed inventory. So we instead applied to include this project, and the state agreed and funded this project.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Lilac, appreciate that. Any feedback from other commissioners as far as either closing the record at this moment, keeping the written record open, or just closing the record and beginning deliberations at this moment?
Well, I'm probably in favor of closing the oral record, closing the written record. There's things in here I don't really understand. I mean, that was kind of brought out when we're talking about it. One is the policy of just copying a state ordinance. I'm not sure. Well, I'll just list mine. So that's one. The second is, are we broadening definitions now, and what's the impact on people's? I mean, I look through the list of what's currently listed as designated, and I'm not really objecting to any of them. I'm familiar with a lot of them, but I don't know what it looks like there's been some changes, and then another just specific question I have is there's a bunch of in the National Register resources, there's a bunch of things that now have been added. I don't know if that was explained why those were now is that because they're all federal or national historic registered places, or we've just incorporated them into the county code and they weren't in the past? Or is it just an update of ones that have been approved since the last time it was approved?
So, Zechariah, you can help explain, including the updated list in the code, and I think it was just to acknowledge that those are protected resources in the code as well as in the comprehensive plan. So perhaps you can just confirm that, and I think that's the key. The second piece is recognizing that the definitions and some of the standards certainly may have broader impacts than previously, but we're still obligated as the county to implement the state code, whether they're in code or just in state law. But I think one of the things that's helpful for the commission to remember, and often we don't, is that Oregon is, if not the only state, one of the only states that requires property owner consent to designate a historic resource on a property. So if a property owner does not agree going forward, then like in other jurisdictions, 20 years ago I worked for the city of Aspen, Colorado, and the city initiated designating all of the city of Aspen's historic resources at that point that were just 50 years old, that really started their ski industry, all the chalets. And boy, you can imagine those people were, some supported it, many were very upset and very angry. That scenario under Oregon law will not play out because property owner consent is required, if that helps.
Just as an observation, it just seems like we're rushing to make things historic, but they're really just first, like you were just saying in Aspen. Whether they're really significant to the understanding of our, history. It's some of them are just, they're all over, they're not historically historical in the sense of, if you look at 2,000 years of things you want to save, some of them are kind of, in my opinion, kind of just that because they're there first almost. But anyway.
Well, and Commissioner, you're exactly right. And I think Curry described it well. Is that the time period just is the starting point to make something eligible? It definitely doesn't mean that it's historic. A decade ago, when we were updating this, 8 years ago when we were updating the inventory, Curry, Gill, and I spoke at that time about how in the mid-2020s, those 1970s ranch houses with the avocado appliances would now become, which I grew up in, to date myself, would become
I have
eligible.
I live in a 1970s ranch house, so
Right. They would become
very historic to me.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
interesting,
Yes.
but it didn't rock the world. It was a little change, and yeah, no, that's right, and an object might be a '55 Chevy, is that a? But I didn't see where she was saying that it has to be not used for 75 years. In Isaiah, I read it just has to be 75 years old. She said not used so that was the difference. I didn't really see where she was getting it from, but
But But Nick, my question then is, okay, let's say you buy a 10,000 acre ranch somewhere and you don't really look at it, but then all of a sudden you find this, family cemetery from the late 1800s. You have to consent to put that on a registry if it's not already? I mean, you don't. You're saying you don't have to consent.
Right. In Oregon, at least for structures, now I would defer to Zechariah on archaeological sites, but for structures in Oregon, the property owner, if they don't consent, if they don't agree to it being listed, then the state or the county or the city cannot designate it historic. So it's a real fundamental difference in Oregon, is that property owners have significantly more rights in the historic preservation process in Oregon than they do in other states. And the only question I would ask, Zechariah, is if that's the case with archaeological resources, because I just don't recall if it's the same for archaeological resources as it is for other structures.
Okay.
Yeah, good question, Nick. And there is a difference between the two. I don't know for sure, so I want to first say that. But my understanding is that a property owner has I think they're required to notify if they're digging or doing some sort of development on their property that they came across something that may be worth further surveying of its archaeological context there. And that's where, if they contacted us, as that requirement relates in the model ordinance and provided in our code, we would reach out to the state archaeologist to get their opinion on how to proceed and follow state rules on that matter as well. Whether or not the property owner can say, nope, I'm not moving forward on this at all. I can't say for certain what that ability is of the property owner. And before I pass the mic off, I do have several other responses to Commissioner Henderson's concerns, if now is the right time to respond to them. But,
Yes, please.
okay. So concerning the idea of copying a state code or state ordinance, the model ordinance, so one process is, what the OARs or ORSs say, and then making that a more readable, available form in county code is something that Deschutes County does and other jurisdictions throughout the state do on a regular basis. I feel like it's rare for a state department to create a model code that sort of helps organizations, jurisdictions bring OARs or ORSs into local code. And I think they do that to particularly help smaller jurisdictions that don't always have the staff to fine-tune the formatting and the interpretations of the state statute as written by the legislature or departments. So we use that language, but as a guiding tool. And another option, if the board is interested, is just simply saying somewhere in our code that for your requirements on historic preservation, consult this Oregon revised statute. That's an option, not necessarily something that Deschutes County has done in common practice, but those are my 2 cents and comments regarding that concern. Expanding definitions, I think Nick hit it really well, that Deschutes County is required to acknowledge these definitions and these processes through what is stated in Oregon administrative rules. So we aren't expanding any protections or definitions, including anything else beyond what state rule says. The National Register resource list is to clarify that sites on the National Register of Historic Places have been are part of Deschutes County's inventory, even though they aren't on our Goal 5 list, they do warrant some protections in county code as we follow and we're required to implement state code as well. So that's why we're adding those National Register resources into our comprehensive plan. And the proposal is to do that for any future resources that are listed as well. And then lastly, while I appreciate the broader discussion on historic preservation and the, what is historic, what is worthy of protections, it's important to note that these protections or these amendments do not expand any landmarks to the list other than what is already in place today. So we aren't adding any properties. There's no nominations currently in the queue that will be impacted by these nominations, or from my understanding are waiting for these amendments to go through so that they can then go through the process to be amended. So important discussion, but just to clarify that we have a historic preservation today. It is out of sync, out of date with the current practices prescribed and required from state code. And that is simply what we are proposing in these amendments, aligning our code with the state rules, not expanding protections, not adding any new landmarks to our list.
So we can quote you on that, Zachariah says. Yes, okay, thank you, Zachariah. That we are not expanding any landmarks, you said to the west or in the west? Just wanted to be exact. Commissioner DeBone, do you have any comments you'd like to make at this time?
It looks like Commissioner DeBone. Oh, there he is.
Okay, my meeting dropped and I came back in and I wasn't on the panel. So now I'm back. So I was able to follow it. I was just out for a little while. The item C under 28140, so where are we at? Are we going to make a decision to close the record?
Yes, we are going to close the record, and either we can begin deliberations today or carry on the deliberations to a later point in time.
Yeah, so I'm supportive of closing the oral and written record at this time, and then I just have a comment or a question. We can look at that item C a little bit now that it's been pointed out to us. Right in the middle of it talks, if a local review is necessary, comma, Deschutes County shall follow these sections. Maybe clarify about who would be doing that. I assume it's the state archaeologist from previous sentence there. But yeah, I mean, who's making the decision if it's necessary or not is the question. And as I say, we can do that at a deliberation time. I don't know if it's right now.
Okay. Wouldn't that come from the state? The determination come from the state, Zachariah? They would say what?
Yeah, correct. That is the intention anyway, and we can certainly add text that further clarifies that. But given that first sentence, staff would reach out to the state archaeologist and then determine if a local review is necessary. But we could absolutely add further text on that.
And this is that same situation we might have been in the past. So does a comment mean there's a decision? And if it's a decision which determines a review is necessary. So, just the wordsmithing of that a little bit. Because comment can be different than, oh, here's your requirement to do a review now. But other than that, the package, is driven by the changes at the state level and alignment. The terminology definitely propagates through the whole package here, so a lot of changes. But yeah, as I say, I don't know if we're delivering right now.
I
Or we wanna
think
set it-
maybe we should wait to deliberate, just
Yep, let's set
so we
that for
can
another
review
date.
this, just a bit more. I think it is very important. And,
That's fine with me.
is that okay?
Yeah, because
All right.
we're kind of behind anyway, so.
Right, we are behind. So to keep us, oh, I know. My question is, Zachariah, is there a date that we must have this done by for the grant? So we're okay if we hold off on our deliberations then?
Yeah, and thanks for asking that question, Chair Adair. There's not a date that needs to be, it needs to be required or completed, sorry,
Okay,
by the grant. So yeah, we're good. I'll work with Sharon and the admin team to get back in front of you for a date for deliberations. But just to clarify that the record is closed
yes.
as of today.
Written and oral records are closed as of today, and then we will begin our deliberations when you confer with Sharon regarding our schedule. So that would be,
Sounds good.
okay,
And
thank
I
you.
would like to, either Nick or Zach, or whoever, talk a little more, just one-on-one about the provisions, just so I make sure I understand what they are.
Sounds good.
Only comes up once in a while, so.
I know. Thank you very much.
It makes sense, and just for your benefit, the planning commission had, they spent a lot of time in their meeting also asking about a lot of the questions, so they're certainly great questions, and
Well, usually if we have a hearing, there's a lot of people come
Yeah.
up, and a lot of stuff gets raised by the people testifying, so this one,
Yeah.
since there's no one testifying, that's probably why they did it too. It's like, well, what's all this mean, and how's this change things, and how do landmark decisions made, historic landmark decisions get made, so that would help,
exactly,
yeah.
great.
Okay, so at this time, we will recess for lunch, Peter, and we will reconvene at 1. And Peter, you'll be the first on the agenda, and we do have our COVID team, which will, I believe, be aware that they would like to be as close to 1:15, 1:20 or something. So, thank you, Peter. Sorry for our morning break. Bless you. Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Peter Russell, deliberations. Are we ready? Okay, we're going to reconvene our afternoon meeting for BLCC. I see you, Peter Russell. Would you
Hello.
like to take it away? Thank you for joining us,
would.
Commissioner DeBonne.
First off, board, thanks for having me back. This is the deliberations on the ODOT plan amendment to modify our transportation system planning text to add a reference to J-turns as an option to the frontage road preceding the raised median between Bend and Redmond, also eliminating the language calling for disconnecting Vanderbilt Road, a county collector, from US 97. You held a public hearing on June 24th on the matter. We received no public testimony. You closed the oral record on that date and kept the written record open to July 15th. We have received no written comments either. So I don't know what to tell you. We had 5 public comments at the Planning Commission, and it was crickets at the board. So at this point, in your package, you've got the proposed language that ODOT has submitted. The changes are shown with strike through for language to be deleted and underline for new language to be added that deals with the aforementioned frontage road and J-turns, as well as the Vanderbilt Road remaining connected to the state highway instead of being disconnected. There are attachments to my memo that I gave you. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
No
Well-
questions from me here.
Okay. Well, as someone who's used the center lane to make a west turn going northbound on 97 between Bend and Redmond, I would really like to see that improved. It's, that center lane isn't wide enough, and so I'm happy that that area of our county is the road system is being addressed. Commissioner Henderson?
Yeah. I mean, personally, I'm more of a survivalist in terms of I'm used to doing it also when I go to take our dogs in and everything else. So I'm just used to the risk, I guess, but I do think it's dangerous. And the only thing I want to make sure is before they do it, they really worked with neighborhoods or, there's a lot of people that access that road along there, and make sure that they're involved or they're thought about. Or I know we had some notice on this hearing, but I don't know if anybody would have come in and just stood up and said they didn't want the ability to have a J-turn, but they may not want the ones that are proposed. So that's my biggest concern about this, I guess, because I know to get rid of all the risk on 97 between Bend and Redmond is a lot, because there's a lot of turns both ways to driveways, and I don't know how much it's going to cost to try to fix that, but that's the way the road's built. And if we're not going to do the what are they called, the side
The frontage roads?
frontage roads, yeah, if we're not going to do those, it does make it difficult for people that actually just turn into their house, or there's some businesses, but mostly houses. So, and for people to get used to it, it's just another risk we run driving.
The fact that they're going to be doing this in phases, we may hear about it right after the first phase is done, that people realize, okay,
Yeah.
that's probably when people will really, become aware of the change.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Yeah, was it 4 phases or 3 that they're
It'll
planning
be
on?
4 phases. The first phase is from Deschutes Junction south for 1.86 miles. And the second phase, they go north from Deschutes Junction to about 61st Street. The third phase is from the Redmond South city limits south to the north end of the second phase. And the last phase is between the south end of the Deschutes Junction phase down to the North Bend city limits. And as you recall, ODOT's planning to have a break for the J-turns about every 2 to 3 miles roughly. Obviously, there's an interchange, you wouldn't have a J-turn, but essentially the ability to make an accommodated U-turn every 2 to 3 miles on that stretch of 97 for the 9.
But, see, that's my kind of thinking, that maybe or maybe not that's the best formula. It really would be, to me, looking at driveways and where they're placed, because there might be stretches that could be shorter or longer. I mean, it shouldn't be just automatic, because that's what people that actually live in these houses are going to think about, is how far they have to go. And so I just, it's not that's not what we're doing today, but I'm putting that out there because there are going to be people that are wondering what's going on, just like Commissioner Dare said. So, but anyway.
Is there a motion to accept the plan as proposed? Staff is recommending acceptance.
I'll make that motion.
So it's amendment on the TSP text. I want to say what it is. That's what you always tell us to do.
I'll move approval of a TSP text amendment, number 1, to amend the TSP text requirements for a frontage road on US 97 between Bend and Redmond. I'm sorry. Frontage precede, how does this, I'm missing something here.
The frontage precedes a US 97 raised median. It's going to be preceded. Yeah, it's not quite. Peter, could you give us any help with that?
So the way I would do it is I would make a motion to approve the text amendment that
As presented.
Yeah, as presented, but what you would say is the text amendment the requirement that a frontage road be in place prior to installing a raised
Yep.
median barrier between Bend and Redmond by adding a reference to J-turns, and 2, removing the language that Vanderbilt Road will be disconnected from US 97.
Okay.
So I'm gonna use that again and say, so moved.
Okay. Is there a
Second.
second? Any further discussion?
So it does give the option of a frontage or a backage road also, so the words do include those. the discussion we just had about citizens finding out that there's going to be big changes is valid. The action will happen when the folks are on the ground making some changes, and since it's in multiple sections, that'll be a good community discussion as it happens. Safety and throughput of that corridor are going to be number one priorities, though. The safety with those medians is going to be very important. And also the transportation bill from 2017 basically kind of pre-allocated the development for a 10-year period. So this is an action that can be put in place for safety in the next few years. And I don't know what the development plans are, but at least the way is paved for these options.
Okay, so any further discussion? Commissioner Henderson?
I vote yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Actually made the motion, and the chair
Yep, that's
will vote yes also. So thank you very much for that. And yes, the citizens will be hearing from them, I'm sure. So I hope ODOT, I know I have used the J-turn over at, I think it was in Lincoln City or something over on the coast. I used it over there without even realizing, so, or recognizing.
Staff will return in a few weeks with the implementing ordinance.
Or was it in Depot Bay? Do you remember, Peter?
It should be, the J-turn I know about is south of Lincoln City.
Okay, all right, yeah. Okay, now we are ready actually for our COVID update. We're just a couple of minutes early. Nahad, I believe there you are. We have your program presentation. Do you want to take over for us?
Yeah, good afternoon. Am I loud and clear?
You are loud and clear.
Awesome. So I'm trying to buy a few minutes of time for Dr. Fawcett to return from the hospital, so I could tell you a story about my life and childhood, or I can give the floor to Dr. Conway for an update on long-term care facilities. Which one do you prefer?
The long-term care facility update, if you don't mind.
You sure? I got
Positive? If you ask.
All right, sounds
Thanks,
good.
Commissioners. So, as we were just starting to meet last week when we started getting results in, I thought we'd update you this week since it wasn't possible to do that last week. So, as has been covered widely, there has been a COVID outbreak at Mount Bachelor Memory Care Facility in the southern part of Bend. The original illness for a resident was on the 9th of July. Now all residents and all staff have been tested, 54 residents, 46 staff. To date, we have 24 residents and 10 staff that are infected. Two residents have been hospitalized. And as of last evening, there were still 2 in the hospital. I've not gotten an update this morning. The measures that have been taken include cohorting of residents, cohorting of staff, separate entry and exit points, including screening areas, separate dedicated spaces for meals and breaks, educating and requiring staff from one unit to not interact with staff from the other unit outside of the facility, including carpooling, and then conducting weekly serial testing on all residents and staff who have tested negative until 2 consecutive weeks with no positive cases in either staff or resident. The State Department of Health Services, part of OHA, and the State OHA Epidemiology Office have both been helpfully involved in investigation and follow-up.
Okay. Dr. Conway, yesterday when we had our personal meeting, you mentioned that there was a possibility of more long-term care facilities with an issue. Has anything happened there?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the full sentence.
Yesterday, when we met, you said there were possibly 2 more long-term care facilities in Deschutes County that may have issues.
Well, there have been cases at 2 long-term care facilities, 1 each, that we are following up on.
1 each?
Yes, and then I will also mention, and thanks to your intervention, Commissioner Adair, as of just yesterday, DHS has also agreed to do their best to add 10 additional facilities for screening in the routine statewide screening, while we had originally been, if you will, relegated to the second tier. Now we'll be able to move up 10, and we're deliberating on which of those 10 would be the best.
Okay, so that does actually put our long-term care facilities in a better spotlight if we can know. Does that mean they'll test all employees and all residents?
Yes, the plan in the cross-sectional testing, the way I understand it, is to test all employees and all residents. But it's going to be there's a very elaborate scheme for tiered sampling. So it will take time, but they've assured us that they're going to try to start including us in that process next week, including Deschutes County next week.
When we talked yesterday, I wasn't, the 5 that we've done pilot projects in, was that all staffed by people supplied by the state or under the direction of the state, or were we doing any involvement with those 5?
Actually, well, there's a team from the Veterans Administration that did a lot of the work. That was organized by the state and consistently assisted on site by our regional long-term care facility liaison, Carrie Coe, who's a very experienced public health nurse.
Is there any, besides the 10 that are now in line possibly to get the program fairly soon, is there any other ways we could, I think we have another almost, 15 or 18 more facilities. Is there any way to expand that beyond the 10?
Well, actually, so in the county, I believe there's 24.
24.
So we have one that we've been following intensely. We've already evaluated 4, so that's 5, and then there's 2 others for a total of 7 that we're looking at closely because of cases already. So it'll bring 17. Once there's 10 done, bring it to 17. So it'll be about 2/3 of the way through. But there are a number of challenges. First is having to make a choice of which 10 out of those 17 should be prioritized. And then the other thing is the state's process is to do sequential testing, and then the follow-up is supposed to be 1/4 of staff and residents following that. So it's going to be a complicated sequence.
Commissioner DeBonne, did you have any questions for Dr. Conway?
No questions at this time. Thank you for your leadership and everybody. So we're going to get through the rest of this update, but I know it's a lot of work for a lot of folks right now keeping up with all this.
Yes, thanks very much, and we are grateful for the additional hires that were authorized. We really do need them, and we're just working our way into bringing up to speed additional staff as well as some contractors. So I think I'll turn it back over to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Conway.
Thanks. I'll stand by for questions.
Yes, please do, Dr. Conway.
I do have a question, Dr. Conway. Because of our testing numbers, that it's putting us at the wrong side of the standard, has that improved at all in the last day or two?
I'm very sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
Okay, remember, don't we have 5 standards that we have to maintain our position in? And I thought our tracing numbers.
Our testing results. I mean, we have had a number of positives, and that could earn us greater scrutiny. We'll hear about that from the Oregon Health Authority later on this week.
Okay. All right. Okay, Nahad.
Yes. Hi. I'm again just checking my voice, making sure that the technology is working.
It is.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful, great. And I believe Dr. Fawcett is also on his way, and it's good to have Dr. Fawcett during the presentation for many reasons. One of which is that he's really he has his he's working on the ground 24/7 with this virus, and he's able to bring that ground level and clinical level perspective to this discussion as well. So that's why I'm hoping that he's able to return from the hospital soon. Let me just start off by introducing myself. Again, my name is Nahat Sadrazodi. I'm the Director of Public Health for Deschutes County Health Services. And hopefully, as I mentioned, Dr. Richard Fawcett, who's our health officer, will be joining. And of course, Dr. Conway, our administrator, is also on the call. As always, I'd like to start with acknowledging a few folks. And today, really, I'd like to start with acknowledging our commissioners. Thank you for your support and consideration of staffing increase during a time when we really could benefit from additional hands on board, giving some people time off, and for morale reasons as well. So the admin assistant position that was recently approved, plus the other additional staff are highly appreciated. And just to mention that, as Commissioner Henderson alluded to this, in fact, the admin assistant will be co-trained as a contact tracer. So we will make sure that they are able to fill in gaps if and when needed at any time in the course of the next 12 months. And I also would like to acknowledge Tom, Eric, and David as well, who've just been great support for us and our department. And before continuing with the presentation, of course, I have to give a shout out to our department staff from both service areas as well as our admin and operations, who continue to work hard and are so dedicated to the community and the well-being of our community. So it's been 133 days since we had the first reported case of COVID in our community. I'm sure you all are well aware of that as well. Here are the numbers in front of us. Last week, we had the highest number of cases in our county at 84. And as of July 21st, which is yesterday, we have a total of 378 cases with around 244 who have recovered. So this week on Monday and Tuesday, we've had 26 cases reported by OHA so far. And just to put this in perspective, commissioners, and for our community, in the last 3 weeks or so, we've had as many cases as we did since March 11th. So that basically gives us a sense of the current reality that we are facing in terms of the numbers increasing. And the reason I'm putting this slide here is to show that not only the rate of change has dramatically increased, the flatter, as I'm sure you're aware, the flatter the curve, the slower the rate, and as you can see, the surge in the last few weeks, it shows the rate of change. But also to really highlight the fact that we're not talking about a second wave here. I've heard a number of folks, not you, but from the community, I've heard a number of folks talk about a second wave. This is not a second wave that we are facing right now. This is a continuation of what started on March 11th, frankly. So that's just to put, again, the trajectory in perspective.
When you say that, Nahad, it's not a second wave in the sense that we haven't had any cases for 3 or 4 months, but it's like it's a, there was that period after we reopened things starting in May 18th, I think it was, where we didn't have any cases or very few cases for about 5 weeks, other than the 23rd, which really wasn't probably related to reopening because you said it was too fast. And then we've had this uptick. It seems like it's because of more activity than it is a wave. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's exactly it, Commissioner Henderson. So we artificially flattened the curve, right, through our behaviors. It wasn't that the virus changed its characteristics like the flu virus would do, for example. We artificially slowed the spread, and then when we also artificially opened up the interactions again and the activities again, the virus basically was behaving and continues to behave the same way as it was before the closure and after the closure. So that's why it's really not a second wave. It's a continuation of the first wave that we, through our actions, influenced.
Yeah. And then the other part of this, I always look back at those weeks between March, late March, early April, when we were up to only 16 or 15 cases per week, but our hospitalizations got as much as 10 or 12. We just weren't doing near the amount of testing, and as we are now, and so I still think those would still have been quite a bit higher if we were testing with the same standards and the same ways we've been testing in the last 6 weeks, where we went up to 1,000 versus 200 or 300. And it seems like we're not, only this last week, to me, seems like it's significantly more cases than what we might have had back in other words, we reopened the economy, but the economy in March and early April was kind of like it is now, except now there seems to be as much activity out there almost, but we would have had a bigger lump back there, wouldn't we? That's my impression.
Yeah, I share some of that impression with you, Commissioner. I think that's why it's important, and I think I've heard all of you say it as well, it's important to look at multiple indicators to understand this story better. So it's good to look at the positivity rate of the tests. So if we're doing 100 tests and we're have one case versus let's do 1,000 and we have 10 cases. So that positivity rate tells us part of the story. The hospitalization rate is another one, right? Even if we're not catching the virus or the cases with the testing, those who get hospitalized, basically that tells the story, and that tells us what's happening in our community. It could be a lot more widespread than we are able to test and identify through lab confirmation.
Nahad?
So it's important to look at these multiple indicators to understand the whole story.
Nahad, I really like to know the hospital rate as of let's say the 1st of May, where we had, that early spike in the hospital. Because now if you put 36 over 378 positives, that's a 9.5% hospitalization for today. But I wonder, to me, it seems like it would have been higher May 1st. I would really be curious as what is that number?
Yeah.
Or do you mean April?
Well,
April, yeah.
Or April.
I was going to...
Okay, well, the accumulate to that point.
Oh, accumulated.
Yeah, just the accumulate up to that point, because we're now at 9.5% hospitalized. So where do you think earlier? April, May, somewhere in there?
Commissioner, I wonder if I could help answer that. First, to Commissioner Henderson's question, I do agree that we have a more complete picture now than we did at the beginning of the outbreak, and it is good that we're getting more testing because it gives us a more complete picture. Because hospitalizations are a lagging indicator, they're a very reliable indicator of the extent of disease retrospectively. So the fact that we have so many hospitalizations now does confirm the findings that we've seen recently in testing. And the other thing that confirms it is our testing 2 months ago was running a little over 2% positive, and it's approaching 6% positive now. So the increase we're seeing is not a testing artifact. It's that we're detecting more cases. The reason if it's expressed as a fraction, like your question, Commissioner Adair, would be different, is that at the time that we were first having hospitalizations, we had very, very limited testing, and most of that was only done for cause, and the cause had to be presenting with a very high level of clinical suspicion.
Well, okay, how many people today in St. Charles are from Deschutes County? Do we have that answer?
Actually, we have two different answers that I'm trying to rectify. So I understood that we had 2 or 3 last evening, but we received some data this morning that may be higher than that. I'm trying to get the answer to that. As a matter of fact, during the rest of the HOD's talk, I may be able to get.
Okay, thank you.
Are you saying 2 or 3 are from Deschutes County, or?
Right,
Yeah.
So really a minority of the people are from Deschutes County.
right, currently.
Yeah, so, and I wonder if we had very many from out of the county before, when we had the.
The recent pattern has been the majority of recent hospitalizations have been from Jefferson County rather than Deschutes. Early in the epidemic, the great majority of hospitalizations were from Deschutes, and especially Bend.
I'm wondering, Commissioner, if in addition to what Dr. Conway said, if we can also, I am hoping that Rich will arrive in the next few minutes and he can also shed more light on that if it's okay with you.
Yes,
Wonderful, great. So in the meantime, I'm just moving on to the next slide, which is on the age group. And here the differentiation is between the cases we are seeing in July, as of July 21st, and cases which were before July. And that's in gray color. I'm not sure if it's so what we see here is basically vast majority of the cases are between 20 and 50 years old, which shows that this group is generally contributing to the higher numbers that we're facing. So that's I think an important piece of information as we think around some policy level decisions.
it's rather interesting that for July, we have no one in the 80 and over category.
In
I mean, that can't, is that really?
July,
No, is that really right?
I think the colors, Commissioner, are not showing well. So we could do better with the colors here. So what we're seeing in July, which is in kind of a bluish, I guess, I don't know, blue-green type of color, you can kindly see the 70 and above. So those are the July cases. Does that
Okay,
go?
if we're saying, okay, I looked at this wrong. This is saying that all the older cases are from July?
That makes sense.
I don't think that's true. I think maybe they've coded it, they've flipped the code, isn't it? I thought we had older cases originally. I didn't bring one of my binders down.
No, we've had cases in 70 to 79 range before July as well, Commissioner. So the numbers are going up, I believe, and I'm sure Dr. Conway can also comment on this due to the recent outbreaks that we're facing in the long-term care facilities as well.
Didn't we have people?
Well, I think what you're showing here, though, is that there were no cases before July in the 80 to 100 era, whereas, and that seems not, I don't think that's true from our memory.
I can see if there was a glitch on that and get back to you,
That
Commissioner.
must be.
I know.
But I make note of that and get back to you on that.
Yeah, it says 0 on both of them, 80
Or
and the
before.
90 range.
Let me, good catch. Let me just check on that and revert if you don't mind.
Sure,
Yeah, is that okay?
of course.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to have extra set of eyes look at these so that we can collectively make sure we are looking at accurate information. So we do see folks with travel history. So in the way the coding is done in the electronic system, we do travel is considered a risk factor, right? It's something that usually through the investigation we ask and we input as a risk factor into the history of the individual. And that doesn't mean that they necessarily caught the virus when they were traveling or not, but we do know that it's associated, it's an associated risk. And a third, a little bit less than a third of of the cases have had travel history. But it's really awfully difficult through investigation to determine exactly if they caught the virus while traveling, or whether they were from their home to the airport, on the plane, when they were coming back. It's really hard to kind of exactly know. And that's part of the challenge that the investigators and contact tracers continue to face. And that really does take us to this next slide, which Commissioner Henderson and the rest of you have asked, what is really driving the high numbers in recent weeks? And let me just explain to the public, because you know very well, but let me just explain to the public why this question is important. Generally in public health versus, let's say, clinical care, we look for patterns so that we could have targeted policies and interventions based on those patterns. And hopefully those are sort of studied and significant patterns that we can intervene. So when we look at the data, we're really interested to identify what are the one or two main drivers. And I think that's what's difficult about understanding what's going on right now, because it's really not easy to identify one pattern, other than what happened in the long-term care facility with dozens of cases. The rest, it seems like it's pretty much equally distributed. So in front of you, what you kindly see is, let's start, let me just give you the sort of the hierarchy of how we look at this and we do the categorization of the cases. Basically, we categorize something as outbreak when we really have a good understanding of time, place, people, and we really have good information. We're able to link those folks together. And that could be two or more folks, but we're pretty sure we're able to see we're able to gather from the evidence how they're linked. And the long-term care facility is a good example of one where we're able to really put people, place, time together and have that information. But it's not always that clear cut. The sort of the next level down is what we call the clusters. And the clusters are not as easily sort of identifiable. The exposure is not so well defined. We know there is some association between the two from the investigation we're doing, but people, if God forbid, if I get COVID now and I go through the history of the last 2 days, I wouldn't know exactly where this virus was necessarily where I was transmitted, unless I remember exactly a person who was COVID positive in a particular setting and I'm linked to that person, right? So cluster, we know there is some association, but we're not sure exactly how that occurred. And a lot of these clusters right now could be associated with businesses where we know one case here, one case there, and somehow linked, but we're not really 100% sure in grasping that. The close contacts, commissioners, are really about me and my friend, me and my neighbor, me and my boss. Kind of, we know there is a confirmed case, and I was in touch with that person, and that I'm going to put my mask on because I have someone in my office. There we go. And I hope you can hear me still very well. So close contacts are those kinds of friends and bosses and neighbors where we know that there is confirmation there and the cases are linked. And I already mentioned clusters. The households as well are basically me and my grandparents or my family members. We visit each other. We know there was a case there, and we get linked. So we're more sure about that. And then there is this other category of sporadic. And this is probably, I would say, again, we're trying to kind of understand this better. This is probably driven by, first of all, sporadic means we're really not sure. And we've done the investigation. We've spent time for hours trying to get as much details as possible. And at the end of the day, we're not sure. They're not able to link it to anything, and we're not able to link it to anything. So it's considered sporadic or community acquired. And what we think is driving some of this right now is the younger population that I was mentioning earlier, who are spending time maybe, I don't know, floating on the river or getting together or in close proximity. And maybe they're not wearing their masks and they're not washing their hands and what have you. So these are where we have the sporadic cases. So as you can kindly see, we have basically this, to some extent it's unfortunate because it's hard to contain when it's all so spread like this. But there is no one driver for everything where we can make policy decisions around. And I just wanted to sort of give that information. I have Dr. Fawcett here as well, and I want to give him a minute to settle down and then invite him maybe to respond to the hospital question you had earlier.
Actually, and it's George again. I do have the answer. I wanted to make sure we had reconciled it correctly. We've had two constraints. One is we haven't had daily feeds from the hospital directly about number of people by county hospitalized, and that's just changed this morning. And they have added that as a tab, so I can tell you that 6 individuals with COVID are currently hospitalized at St. Charles.
From Deschutes.
Yes. Previously, we've had to reconstruct this by using the lagging information that came into Orpheus, but now we're getting as a feed, as are the other counties from.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing that, because that, from our standpoint, that's something that, on the other hand, instead of increasing worry, it helps, somewhat decrease it. When it goes, as it goes up, it's good to know that they're not all from here. I mean, if that's our goal, is to keep people from worrying too much. Maybe that's not our goal.
So we know that 5 were in ICU and 5 were on a ventilator. That was yesterday's number that was corrected. All 5 were on ventilators. Do we know if any of those are Deschutes County residents?
No, it's not broken down that way.
Okay, and what is our number to the end of June? Is it 196 or is it 183? Our June 30th number for COVID positives. Do we have an accumulative number somewhere?
I'm sure we can get that, but I don't have it in hand.
Well,
It's almost,
well, that's what I did. I just was trying to figure out which one, if it had been coded, if the colors are flipped or whatever.
No, I was looking at,
Oh, that, to add all those up.
if you're just looking for positives,
Yes,
it
but
looks like it's between 100 and 150.
So we'll be very happy to get back.
Okay,
that information.
thank you.
It's readily recoverable. I just don't, I'm looking at 2 spreadsheets already, and it's not on either of those.
All right. So now we're on to the 2.5% positivity page, I believe. Are we not?
yes, I have, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide and give Rich the floor here. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello, thank you, Commissioners, for inviting me. I apologize for coming back late after lunch. So looking at the overall test positivity rate, again, this is something I think that we find helpful to look at, not just the total number of positive tests, but also the test positivity rate, meaning how many positive tests do we have week to week or day to day per the total number of tests done. As of yesterday, our rate was at 2.5%. That's a rate that back in early June and May, and even in April, actually, had been usually more like around 1% or less. So that has gone up. That's the total for the week there. This is looking at the raw numbers. There are the total cases and the total positive tests. We're looking on there for that slide. So let's see. I don't have a next slide, but I guess I can take any questions, and I'm sorry for coming late. If you had, did you want to go to the next slide?
Oh, no, thank you, Dr. Fawcett. I realize that you're practicing medicine, which is incredibly important. and we appreciate that immensely, your participation and all your help for our commission and for keeping track what's happening.
But in terms of the positivity rate, before we go on, that's still a pretty low number, really, isn't it, even within Oregon? Because we see those charts in the bulletin where they do county by county, and we're one of the lower percent per thousand or whatever.
Right. I think what my eye's been attracted to a bit is just the rate of rise, though. But week to week, we're if you look at the number of total tests that we do per week, and then divide that by the number of positive tests, or vice versa. So in any case, the last few weeks, our test positivity rate has really been going up. And that's why our overall positivity rate may have been under 1% just a month ago, and now it's 2.5. So our numbers are fairly high week to week, though, in terms of positivity rate.
But
Right,
the
overall,
next step after positivity, so it's, it seemed like our high point back in late March or early April was 10, 12 in the hospital, but it seemed like most of those were from our county. Now we're at half that from our county. Is that, so there's more positives, but it's kind of like less effect or something? Is that possible, or less seriousness, or?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's more Deschutes County residents that are testing positive, not just total numbers, but the rate. And then in the hospital, I agree with you that if you look at how many new cases we have per week, or the test positivity rate per week in the community, those numbers are higher than they were back in April, but we have maybe a little less, slightly less total numbers of patients in the hospital. So I think this is a bit of a phenomenon we're seeing countrywide, that we have, less severely ill people per, compared to the number of total tests. So that's something we're seeing. Now, the problem there, of course, is there's a delay between when patients are first diagnosed and when they get sick enough to even be admitted. There seems to be this lag. So we don't know if when we start to stabilize our numbers of cases in the community and that starts to go down, we might even see more deaths. I hope we don't, but there is this lag between cases diagnosed and cases hospitalized, and then cases that pass away. There seems to be, a couple weeks between all those time points.
But then there's always the case, like the Crook County resident that died like the day after. I believe she was tested. She died on the 3rd, and the test came through on the 4th or something. So I know. Well, you see the people that get to the hospital, and that's usually, more aware of what their situation is.
So, Nahat, I haven't seen your next slide, but so are you going to go on and talk about the recent results and how they diverge from this cumulative total?
No, the next slide is on.
Okay. So if we go back to that slide about the 2.5 positivity rate, that's the cumulative rate.
Right.
And early in this, the percentage of test positive for the last week that we have compiled, which is the 10th through the 16th, was 5.9%. So the rate has gone up substantially, concomitant with this increase that we've seen occurring since the last full week in June. The other question that Commissioner Adair had asked, the unreconciled total that had been reported to OHA through June on the 30th was 181, and the unreconciled total of positive cases was 183 on July the 1st. Now, those are unreconciled because there were some presumptives that have been tidied up since then, but we can also go into archives to do that. The best thing would be when Dr. Faith is back next week. We'll be happy to provide that information then.
Thank you.
So we have had as many cases since June 30th as we've had before June 30th, basically.
That would indicate we've had more. That would indicate, yes, very
It's
close.
really close.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's similar for Oregon, and it's, of course, much higher ratio than that in many of the Sunbelt states.
Yeah.
Okay, so going to the next slide, let me just distance myself. Go ahead.
This looks at Deschutes County residents and just breaking down our total number of cases as to which ones were ever hospitalized and which ones have not been hospitalized. So far more of our COVID-19 cases have not been hospitalized. And the total this as of yesterday would have been 36 of our cases would have been hospitalized at one point in time. I believe St. Charles reports a higher number than 36 because there are a number of patients, both now and in the past, that are not from Deschutes County, either from a neighboring county or from out of state. So that number 36 does not include all of the COVID-19 patients at St. Charles hospitals.
So as we start, one of the questions I've kind of started to think about more after 4 months of this, which I think the shutdown was 4 months tomorrow, is when they did the stay home, save lives. Since, what in a serious, you could argue that 36 hospitalizations in 4 months. Are there other things we have that many hospitalizations of? I mean, people compare it to the flu or the, in a bad year. Is that, I don't know if 36 is a lot or not. I mean,
well, I would just remark that of the 36, and I'm sorry not have the breakdown on that, but a fair number have been in the ICU or are mainly in the ICU. So although we are seeing somewhat milder cases now compared to, say, April, as Commissioner Adair just mentioned, I think 5 in the ICU and or on ventilators at any one given time, in the summer is unusual for any disease. So even though there's just 36 for the whole pandemic in Deschutes County, that represents a fair number of fairly ill individuals. And we're just starting to grapple with very, extremely sick patients now. I think there's no trend in that, but what I'm pointing out is that a lot of the patients that were on ventilators back in April actually recovered. They were extremely ill, but they seem to respond even without remdesivir, which is our main backbone of treatment now. But we do have a couple currently that are extremely ill. So the breakdown of the 36, the total, of all patients in and outside of Deschutes County is probably pretty higher, much higher than that. I don't know if it's double, but I would say, for spring and summer, for any infectious disease, if you said, say, half of them were in the ICU, so if you're looking at 20, 30, 40 in the ICU, that's a little bit unusual for most infectious diseases, I think. Outside of maybe a bad flu season, I say a bad flu season, meaning one in which our vaccine does not really predict the circulating strain very well. Some seasons we do quite well, others we do poorly. But again, we'd like not to have COVID-19 circulating in the community and the hospital in the same time as influenza. It would just double, or maybe more than double the amount of work and mortality.
Yeah, and
So
I appreciate.
if I could, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
So if I could add, a few points. One is that we have to bear in mind that COVID is additive to those other diseases, that people having COVID doesn't prevent other diseases. So this is an additional burden. The second, I would agree with what Dr. Fawcett said, that it's unusual to have that substantial fraction in the ICU. When we do see a lot of people in the ICU, sort of historically, a lot of that would be post-surgically, that they had some acute thing immediately post-surgically. These are people that are all very ill. And then the third thing is that because hospitalization is a lagging indicator, and because we've had sudden, very sharp increases, especially last week, we may still see additional people from the cases that have been detected end up in the hospital. And then one other thing worth noting is that historically, most of the people that we've seen requiring hospitalization, and definitely in the ICU, have been the typical perception of risk in the early part of the epidemic, which was elderly and with underlying medical frailties, underlying conditions. We're now seeing some young adults as well, and not all of those with underlying frailties.
So,
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. And I wasn't trying to diminish that 36 was not too many. I don't know what goes on typically in how many, I think the way you said it, of infectious diseases, how does it compare with others and what, and I agree, I understand it's additive, but.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course, the other thing to bear in mind is we know we have an outbreak of COVID, and you want to compare that to other outbreaks. And there's certainly been flu outbreaks where we had high hospitalization and even mortality as well. But mercifully, we haven't had one of those recently.
Yeah.
I think, Commissioner Henderson, I think your question is also pertinent because of something you have raised in the past too, which is really how long does it take to recover and the residual impact of this virus on our well-being. And I think I presented some data last week that, for example, for every death, 18, 19 people are hospitalized, and half of them have permanent lung damage and heart disease and neurological damage. And they could also take months and months to recover. So I think if we put all of those together, then it really does make this virus quite insidious. And I do want to just before going to the last slide, Commissioners, I want to make sure that I did reach out to the team quickly to make sure that we get the data and confirm. And they confirmed that prior to July, we did report on 60 and above cases, but over 80, none were recorded. So they did go back just now as we were talking and confirm that and get back to me. And I'll be happy to also discuss this more with you during the one-on-ones, and so that we don't compromise any privacy matters. So if I can just quickly go to the last slide.
None were recorded prior to July.
Nine?
None, zero. Didn't you just say zero? None were recorded over 80 prior to July 1st?
Doesn't sound right.
So prior to July, Commissioner, we, as far as the data that I'm receiving right now, we didn't have anyone over 80 reported.
I've got all my old books. I'll check them.
That conforms to my memory. But please bear in mind that we have a substantial portion of our new cases are from long-term care facilities, which are very heavily populated with elderly people. So I don't find the transition that surprising. But it is concerning. That's one of the reasons I mentioned about hospitalizations, is that when you have so many people that are infected that are quite elderly, then that's a very high-risk population.
Yes, that is extremely worrisome, and I know the fact we have 2 in there already. Okay, well, let's hope that it doesn't get any worse.
Well, I think, and as we move to this last slide, I think it's good to remind ourselves that actually pretty much the only tools we have right now to protect ourselves are quite commonsensical and straightforward, but yet somehow complicated to implement. So we know that wearing a mask, we have the science, we have the evidence. I don't think anyone can argue about the fact that it can protect everyone. So wearing a mask is quite critical, and I appreciate that you have been role models in the community in wearing masks from very early days when masks weren't even required. You were really in front of it. But wearing masks is not just a fashion statement, right? And I do see our community actually complying with wearing masks. And there are times though where I also, a few places here and there, I see perhaps that it's being used as a chin strap or just not covering the nose or what have you. So I think this little graphic here is kind of to put a smile on our faces and also to remind us that wearing a mask properly is important for preventing transmission, or at least reducing transmission. Watching our distance, that from day one, we were talking about social distance, then we shifted to physical distance because we need to be socially connected. but we need to be physically distanced at the same time. And that is really, really critical. And actually, I go for walks in the morning at 5 a.m. with my dog, and I see people, as soon as they get close enough, they put the mask on to pass, even though it's a wide road and what have you. And I really appreciate that our community is paying attention to that. Washing our hands, it's good practice, not just now, but all the time, frankly. So I think that's just a transferable skill, I would imagine, even post-COVID for us. And as I've said before, our behaviors make a difference. And I have no doubt that we're going to get through this crisis together because we're Deschutes United, Deschutes Caring, and Deschutes Smart. And before, Commissioner, I give you the floor, I forgot to mention one person. I forgot to acknowledge Sharon from your team, who has also been very helpful with all these meetings and other requests. So I forgot to mention her, so I'd like to acknowledge her as well. Thank you.
And thank you, Sharon, for all that she does. And I'm not going to tell my cat, Coco Minton, that he didn't get to be the model, but I'm sure that I don't know what this cat's name is, but anyway, that was a cute idea. Because you do see the mask worn all kinds of ways, and you know what, you just show him this picture. The cat knows best.
Thanks for your time, Commissioners.
No, thank you.
So, a quick request. We just had some new governor's orders come out today, 11 o'clock, going to be implemented for Friday, is my understanding. So there's going to be another cycle of people asking, what are the best practices? Could you remind us, our environmental health and your public health office is providing, a phone number, some technical assistance and guidance on what are the best practices for businesses, because we're going to be switching modes again on Friday.
Thank you, Commissioner, for putting a plug in for our environmental health team, Eric Monet and Emily Freeland, who have been instrumental, and other staff on environmental health who don't actually get the recognition, but they're also working behind the scenes day and night. And yeah, that team has been that team is available. I think the number, I don't have it handy right now, but I think the community does have the number handy, and the businesses. You wanted to say something, Commissioner?
Oh, yeah, Deschutes.org, you can get the number real quick. That's a good way for people to get to it.
Thank you for that. Yes, and on Facebook too. I know we can get it on Facebook as well. So definitely that team is available and ready to respond. We also have a hotline as well, or a call center, where we have staffed the call center with really knowledgeable experts there, and they're also happy to answer any of your questions and concerns. So all of us, I get emails forwarded from you, Commissioner. Thank you for forwarding them to us. We get emails all the time, and we're also trying to respond to them as quickly as possible. The most important thing is to provide timely, accurate information to people so that they can make informed decisions. At the end of the day, it comes down to their choices, our community's choices and behaviors. So we're hoping that accurate information can help facilitate that.
Yes, thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you again for your support for our team, for our staff, and helping us kind of get energized during this tough period. Thank you again.
Nahad, I have a question.
Ma'am.
I have something regarding procedural masks, which I find they're the easiest ones to, if you're going to live in a mask all day, I think you might have one on. Anyway, I received an email from Nathan this morning saying that he had ordered 50,000, which arrived, which have been given out. But I really think we should keep more procedural masks available. You just never know. So I don't know if you could discuss it among yourselves and talk to Nathan about that. But I guess they, let the department heads know about it. But I just feel like procedural masks are a safer way to spend a lot of time in a mask.
Okay, Commissioner, that's a good point. I'll definitely make note of that and have a conversation or try to reach out to Nathan. Thanks for that.
Okay. Well, I just was disappointed there weren't any on the list now.
Well, so in that questionnaires that I had developed, and then we got some answers, and then Nathan wrote the answers, he said he'd actually given out 100,000 procedural masks to
Right. I know.
partner agencies, so we didn't keep any, is that what you're saying?
Right. I'm just saying because these, you wear them and then you throw them away. You don't have to wash them. but, you know, you need to have a fresh mask on every day. If you sneeze in it, you need to throw it away and put a clean one on. So, anyway,
That
that's why, I just think it's important.
Well, that was one of the kind of disconnects I had, was that as I went through these questions, I was asking, you know, how many do we have, and do you have any shortages? And his basic challenge now is keeping a stockpile for first responders. And I asked, is that just law enforcement, EMS, and fire? And he said it was. It's not. I kind of thought, well, we'd have a stockpile for county employees.
Right.
1,000 of those, which we could go through quite a few if people were wearing them, and then we'd have.
1,000 isn't enough, really.
No, we have 1,000 employees.
Right, well, yeah.
So I'm
No.
saying we could go through a lot, and then, you know, I like this distribution that went on was not, you know, I don't know what the guidelines were of who was considered a partner agency, but it was kind of done without it. I mean, so I'm just kind of piggybacking on what you said, is that I don't know who's ever set the goals about where we put what would we like to have if we could have them, but it seems like there's some that, I mean, I don't know where to go find 20 masks right now if I needed them. I have no
Commissioner?
idea. I've
So-
been here for a while.
For county employees, we do have a stockpile. We work with Nathan and also facilities on ordering those, and then departments can fill out a work order, and facilities will deliver those masks to departments. For county employees and also,
Are you the keeper of the number, or who's the keeper of the number of those?
Risk works with facilities on
See,
that.
I've never known that in 4 months. I didn't know we had a stockpile, so maybe I'll send this questionnaire to you. You can put your 2 bits into, because that's what I was trying to figure out about, you know, as we go to this mandatory masks at everything, now it's down to 5-year-olds. I guess people can go to the stores and buy them, but it wouldn't bother me for us to help supply some people, and I don't know what we're doing. We've never had a discussion about it since that I know of.
Commissioner, if I could add, I think Sergeant Garabee was answering that way about first responders, et cetera, is that the 2 things that are tracked as part of our readiness criteria have to do with PPE and other response inventories in the hospital system and in the first responders. So that's why they track that number closely. Things that are available in the public market, we can also just put in and purchase. We can also ask for circumstances like this for use of some inventory as well.
Okay. Thank you.
All I know is I would like more ordered, just because it's, you know, it just doesn't seem like we have enough. I mean, if we have 197,000 people in Deschutes County, and now, you know, this is adding children down to what, 5 years old? So that's, I'm not sure if they could wear these. There's probably too big for them, but, you know, it's going to be something we're going to have to follow up on. So, all right. Dr. Conway, is there anything else additional you wanted to say, or Nahad?
But Dr. Fawcett may want to add something regarding the face masks for children. Did you want to say
Oh,
something?
I haven't had a chance to really look at that recommendation, but I think what, you know, this may have been already said, and I apologize if there's any redundant information, but I think that, well, week to week, the trends we're seeing is just little, what I would call little clusters here and there, where people are not being careful. And I feel like part of the reason, again, for this increase in the elderly patients, it has to do with these little outbreaks we have, namely Mount Bachelor. And you know, if you look back at that, the way this sort of seems to happen, we're working on this, but often it's a caregiver who has a mildly symptomatic or asymptomatic infection who starts the outbreak. And sometimes these are caregivers that have been careful, but sometimes socializing with people who are much more likely to socialize on the weekends and be less careful. So there seems to be this transmission from those that are not distancing or wearing masks to people who are healthcare workers. So we are seeing some of that trend, I think, and we're going to work more on that data so we can get more hard numbers on that.
Thank you.
Commissioner, in answer to that sort of call for additional statements, it's important for people that are putting masks on young children that they only use the ear loop type, because anything that ties behind the head could add an additional strangulation hazard. The other thing is they'd want to be sure for young children that there's good airflow can go through it, because what we call their tidal volume, the amount of air that they move either way, can be limited. But the most important thing is that they should only use the ear loop style. They're secured this way and not anything that goes around the back of the head.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Conway, for making that known. And perhaps Whitney can put that on a public service announcement for the county, because parents need to know that. That would be the worst. So
Actually, we've been discussing this with OHA, and that's something I had reached out actually yesterday. I wasn't aware that that particular thing was going to be promulgated as policy today, but that's something I'll be following up on.
okay, great. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that thought. So, all right. Okay, so are we?
Commissioner Dare, I don't know if you said you had intended to bring up the AOC letter on ag and food processing, that,
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you want to do that now while we're on COVID, or do that
Sure.
later on.
Did you see that letter, Commissioner Henderson? You didn't? They sent it yesterday. I know, I already let AOC know to add my signature to it as an individual. I have a copy of it in my office. Can I leave it on? I'll give you a copy of it today. Commissioner DeBone, do you have that? Did you let AOC know about adding your
Get in my
signature to the OSHA letter? And Eastern Oregon was also going to do the same thing. But I haven't
Yeah, I
seen their
figured
letter yet.
I'd wait till we communicated about it today, knowing that it was out there and we can bring it up here today. So, yeah, I think the concept is that the rules that are being put in place by OSHA for COVID and the procedures in the field are being moved through real quick and made permanent. And I think they're asking to slow way down and make sure we're thoughtful about what's happening in the field for these workers.
But would it be more
and so-
impactful if we had all three of us sign it?
Well, we could. So, I mean, Deschutes County
We should write our
is
own
in-
letter, too.
Yeah, and it's the philosophy of what's going on more than, you know, the migrant workers and the food production. And we just don't have that industry as much in Deschutes County proper. You know, we do have it in the state of Oregon. So I'm just kind of pointing out the separation a little bit.
I checked with environmental health on any complaints that we had received or were receiving related to either ag or food processing locations, and we really haven't in our county. And as Commissioner DeBone said, as you all know, it's many outbreaks have been tied to ag operations or seafood plants and other things like that, which we simply don't have here in our county. But certainly more of an issue in other places, but that certainly doesn't mean that we couldn't weigh in also if you'd like to.
Well, is this the one that Vicki Breeze Iverson was talking about in the
Yes. It's
morning meeting? Yeah. So, and she was saying it was going to have a bad effect on a lot of businesses, that these newer rules. Isn't that what the
right.
gist of it was?
There's no public hearings. It's all just.
Well, I'm willing to sign it. I mean, we don't have to. It's not. Yeah, I'm willing to sign it. I get and it is the philosophy of, well, we'll just do this, change all the rules, and not look at the impact. So if there's one to sign, I don't know, whatever it takes.
There's an AOC letter that Sarah's collecting the signatures on. So.
Okay.
So
I just got to get a hold of her then.
Yeah, let Sarah know, and I have a copy of the letter. There's a copy of the letter for you. And then Susan Roberts and Paul Andrews were doing a letter from Eastern Oregon, and I sent Susan an email this morning, said I was interested in seeing her letter, and please get it to us as soon as she could. So I haven't seen that yet in my inbox. So Commissioner Henderson, did you feel like most of your questions today, we've gone through most of them?
Yeah, well, actually, I was going to bring you up to speed because you haven't had a chance to visit with either of you about them, and I put them out before last Wednesday, and then I kind of filled in what we learned last Wednesday in light blue. Dark blue is what I got yesterday, and there's, I don't know if you've got this sheet too, Commissioner DeBonne.
Yeah, I
I
have
was
it.
trying to get some more. One was the issue of, well, we didn't have enough testing going on, and what I've really learned since in 10 days is I had no idea till yesterday that there was 5 different ways that they could do rapid testing, and the hospital's using 3 of them, and I didn't have any idea why, and that's where the big shortage was. So I guess that was one of the things I've learned that I didn't know a week ago. And then I was interested in who's being tested, and it was kind of surprising that they thought that most people being tested now are the medical providers testing for pre-surgeries or pre-procedures, and that was interesting. And then people that are sick were next, and that the least were the ones being traced. They're actually the only ones they test that they find from tracing are ones that have bad enough conditions that, they kind of fall into the sick category. So I had kind of had the impression that they did the contact tracing, went out and they found 25 people, and then they tested them all. They don't. They just test somebody that gets sick. So that was interesting to learn that. I still feel that there's this, number 3 was, what have we learned from the contact tracing? I like how NIDHOD is splitting it out into, or the way they do it medically, outbreaks and clusters and this and that, but I'm really looking at more specifics, which was the state report that goes into it has a list of every business more than 5 people in the entire state that has more than 5 people with getting positive. You get a better picture of what kind of businesses could do it. So, like one was orchards. There's 3 orchards in the Dalles that have, outbreaks. Well, orchard work is, you're not in a closed room with, unless they're in the packing houses of those places, which could be. But I don't know, we're not getting really much feedback. I don't have much feel yet of,
It's like the Walmart distribution in Hermiston.
Yeah.
Just had a huge outbreak.
Yeah.
Umatilla County, Hermiston.
Yeah.
It's just really over the top there. But one of the things about the state statistics is that 32% of the positives are Latinx. 32.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me.
But it's way higher than what their state percentage is of residents. So, we have to do a better job of educating and having our, the signage and English and Spanish, I think is extremely helpful. So the more we can do, and I believe the person they just hired in our health department is bilingual, so that'll be very helpful.
Yeah, if they can get out to this, these communities, that's a lot of what it is. And we see that. I don't know if we see that in Deschutes County or not. I've never had any discussions about various race or ethnic populations in Deschutes County. I get what's happening in Oregon, but one of the things that's amazing about Deschutes County is I don't think there were any businesses in Deschutes County that had more than 5 in an outbreak format, and there were, this was our first long-term care facility where other counties have lots of them. That was interesting. I don't know if you've both seen the state list. It's the report that comes out on, I think on Wednesdays that they've through the previous Sunday, and it has every entity. And have you seen those?
Right.
It's amazing.
Yes.
I hadn't really studied it before. That was new to me.
Yeah, no, it's just like Warm Springs actually with their 133 cases. I believe yesterday they've really closed down. They're really trying to get a handle on it. So.
Well, they're doing quarantine, yeah.
Right. I know.
But so the only other thing I learned about the testing was that we have 37 testing facilities within 3 tri-counties. I had no idea that there was that much going on, or there are that many places you could go to for whatever it's worth. So it seemed like it was, gotten most of the questions kind of answered.
The interesting thing is that on my sister's EDCO call yesterday, people are calling up. They want to build houses here. They want to move here. And then I also saw the message from a realtor. It had 4 calls from people from Portland. So I think we're going to be pretty busy. But we have to get this under control in the meantime. So we're now at 1 o'clock, is that right? Eric?
So for that letter to OSHA, it's kind of not our domain. So I would think there's possibly not a letter from Deschutes County, but as our participation with Eastern Oregon counties, and we could all just do individual advocacy on that. Just letting you know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Devon. Eric, do you want to
Yes.
talk about our vacancies?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Just as background, the Budget Committee recommended that Deschutes County eliminate 1.5% of positions, and specifically vacant positions, after the budget was adopted. The current year budget has 1,073 positions, so 1.5% is about 16 positions. The board in round 1 of the position cuts eliminated 5.75 positions. And then about a week and a half ago, the board eliminated an additional 5 positions in round 2, which puts the total positions that have been eliminated so far at 10.75.
You know, I got 11.2. I added that up.
There's a .02. One of the positions is a point,
0.02?
yeah,
It says .2 here.
0.05.
or .05. There's a couple of fractions that are easy to.
Oh, the 0.5. Oh, that's where I made my mistake then. So there is a .2?
There was a .2 management analyst in health.
And then the 0.5. Okay, that's where I made my mistake then. Thank you.
What was provided to the board in the packet is an updated list of vacant positions. Page 1 has positions shaded in green. These are the 10.75 positions that have been eliminated to date. Then the next positions listed are kind of a light orange or salmon color. That's pages 2 through 4 of the report. You'll also note that some positions have a strike-through, meaning that they have since been filled due to the critical nature of the position. In addition, you'll see positions highlighted in yellow that are new to the report. And sometimes there's a bit of a lag time between when we put the new position on the report and when we get the updated information from the department in terms of the business justification for the position and the funding source. So those often come in later after the report has been published. So Kathleen can probably provide updates to those on specific positions. And then the next grouping of positions was made at the board's request. That's
Wait a minute, so are you still in the pink then?
Yes, yes.
Those are all vacant, but what'd you call them? They're vacant, but what?
These are just vacant and available for eliminating.
Okay.
The next grouping is the dark orange, and at the board's request, we separated these out. These are positions in the health services department that are, I use the term 100% grant funded. So those are separated out. There was discussion last time with the board about whether or not we need to remain, having these positions frozen since they're 100% grant funded and often tied to the performance of a grant. And then the last grouping of positions are the positions in blue, and these are vacant positions in offices that are headed up by an elected official. And then I'll also just add that at the last discussion with the board, there was discussion among the board about, since we have not eliminated any positions in elected officials' offices, whether or not we want to carve those out, those number of positions out of the 1.5%. And then the last bit of information is there's a number of department heads are on the line in case you have questions about specific positions. Mainly it's the department heads who have positions in that second grouping of positions in salmon. With that, I'll turn it back over to the
me
board.
on the electeds, rather than carve them out, like, we'll do, instead of 1.5, we'll do 1.1 because the other ones aren't under our jurisdiction or something. I think we should make a, request to them to be part of our effort. I mean, it was a budget-wide thing. I mean, I haven't talked to the sheriff about it yet, but I know his response was, it was up to him. Well, we should ask him to join us because we're trying to, do this countywide, and so maybe we need to ask him the same. Let's see, there's the assessor and the clerk, and we can just talk to him. But 1.5 out of the clerk's office is different than 1.5 out of the sheriff's office. But I don't want to really cut our mandate, so to speak, because we do the, so I guess that would be my solution to that, is see what we can work on, because this is kind of an emergency type thing we're doing, that we're trying to say, well, if things get worse, we're not really sure right now, because we had already gotten our property taxes for this year, and we'd already gotten other things, so some of the departments aren't really impacted in terms of financially until the next, coming years, so.
Or throughout the current fiscal year.
Yeah, and if some of them are state funded, yeah, too, so. That's what I do with that. That's my thought on the electeds. What's everybody else think?
Well, I know that Sheriff Nelson sent an email and said there wasn't anyone that he could lose. And that was about 2 weeks ago, I believe. But there are,
Well, we all saw the same
23.5.
email.
Are there
The same email.
23.5 people listed that are vacant currently? So, on this list, new vacancy filled through end of year. So the captain, filled through end of year, is there a reason why it would be on this list then, like for the sheriff?
The captain position?
Right, it says filled with retiree rehire.
Yeah, Captain Schultz is continuing on, but the position technically is vacant.
Okay.
Why is he considered vacant?
Because we received his retirement notice.
When?
Recently? he's...
Yeah, Captain Schultz is technically retired. He's been rehired back under the PERS Senate Bill 1049 opportunity where he can return to work without an hours limit. So he's continuing to work in that position, but it is or will be vacant when he officially leaves, which at this point is projected to be the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
Too bad.
And I noticed there's no vacant positions in IT then?
That's correct.
How many employees does IT have?
I know the answer to that because you keep asking that.
Yeah, I know.
I have the FTE by department.
Okay. What's their
So-
history then?
IT has,
22.
well, it's a little bit, what the IT department in the budget, it lists about 16, but then separately is the GIS function, and I believe there are 3 positions in there. It's about 19.
Well, they have 19. How long have they had 19? Do you know the history?
Let's see, this budget has a couple of years. It's been pretty stable at least the last several years.
So you're meaning it's been 19 for like 4 years?
Probably 4 to 5. and they've actually might have shed a position or two.
I know, I thought technology was getting to be more efficient.
That's a very complicated. IT has kind of changed their business focus. They used to actually do the programming and write county software. Now they have kind of transitioned to assist departments on purchasing software and other business functions.
Okay. So,
I threw out an idea about electeds. I just want to know what you and Commissioner DeBone think. Do you like the idea of talking to them individually or not? I mean, I don't want to spend my afternoon thinking about it. Mr. DeBone?
I think the current set of vacancies that we had already selected was enough for me. So to go further is a choice of the other commissioners at this time.
What are we at? 1% now, you said, or what is it?
when,
Yes, 1%.
Okay. Well, I'd like to do what we were asked to do by the Budget Committee. So, Commissioner Dare, what do you think about the electeds? I mean, I'm going to talk to them. I'll go ask them.
I think we should talk to them again.
Let's go. I'll go do that in the next week.
There's a lot of positions there that are empty, so I guess it'd be 22.5 in the sheriff's office. And it sounds like our population is not going to be going down.
So do we have, to some extent, this is an exercise because we are adding people in other ways. I mean, we've just, within the health department, between 3 grants, we've added about, that weren't part of our budget. I mean, they're not funded on a regular basis, but we're funded now. So I guess we're looking at, do we need to just then focus on the pinks for another, maybe we're kind of behind today, we could focus on the pinks for another week and see if there's anything that pops out to us, or if there's quite a few pinks, 5 pages. Did you have a recommendation, Eric?
We don't at this point for the pinks.
So Commissioner Dare, I'd propose, since we've got some other things to still do today, we focus on that and bring it up next week and see if we can see anything else. Maybe we can do some independent work on, are you okay with that?
I'm actually okay with that. I think that would probably be a good idea.
We could meet with Eric individually and talk to him about people and departments.
I knew there were some needs for behavioral health, down in South County, and I'm hoping that Janice was able to search for new employees for that program, because I knew she was going to have a morale issue if she didn't. That one was highly impacted, where 3 people resigned within a couple days.
And I believe Janice is on the line, so if you have
Oh, Janice, do you want to, can somebody put that shade down for me, please? All of a sudden, it just kind of came in. Thank you, Tom. Janice?
Hi, Commissioners.
How's South County, and how are we doing there?
Well, we're still short-staffed in South County. We got permission to add 2 of the 3 vacant positions and go ahead with offers, but we have a candidate selected. We're still waiting for approval on that candidate, and that's still a busy office. The need hasn't changed since we discussed it.
Okay, but you feel better about it, though?
No, in truth, I don't. We really need to fill all of the open positions in South County, and we're not able to do that until there's a decision made by this entity, and then we're able to move forward on hiring in a more normalized way. So we're really waiting on that to get back to normal hiring, frankly. So that one additional position, there's a candidate waiting. We've been speaking with her each week. She was selected. She's waiting on an offer letter, which is waiting on the decision of this entity.
Okay.
So you're on hold because we're evaluating all these positions? I would have agreed when it came up 2 weeks ago that we needed to hire someone there.
Well, yeah.
We did
So we'll-
authorize the 2 positions at South
Yes,
County.
two were authorized. Yeah.
Just 2? Okay.
There were 3 vacants?
Right, there were 3
Commissioners,
people.
and I'll take the hit on that one. I've been pretty firm on the hiring freeze that we put in place some weeks ago, so I've truly only been authorizing ones that I think are critical, and the ones that have been authorized are related to either the COVID response or the stabilization center. So it's a judgment call, and I hear what you're saying now in South County. I can authorize that one this afternoon, or those positions, but I just, I'm trying to.
I'm glad you're firm on that, because I feel like we had the CCBH program back in 17. Now we've added a whole wraparound program. We've got a COVID program. We've got full-on staff 24/7 beyond any stabilization center in Oregon. Maybe except for Multnomah. So we've added all sorts of things, and that's how I feel. So I don't know. Well, other things are not growing. We're growing a lot of things. So I'm glad you're doing that. I don't know if we would. Maybe it's the week you weren't here, or I don't remember. We had the discussion about needing to get a critical team number down there, which I agreed with that philosophy. But I don't know enough about it to know how many is in a critical team. But that's different to me than the, however many we have in the Bend facility, because there's a different concept down there, I guess, is how I feel.
So, Janice, I think we just heard Mr. Anderson is going to give you permission today, and so that we can know that South County will be taken care of. If that's Commissioner.
So we've already authorized 2, and this is the 3rd one, or what? I don't quite get the picture.
It was a hopeful program going on, and 2 people that worked there gave notice. They took jobs somewhere else. They completely left the community. It didn't leave just like 3 people running everything, and the morale has been really impacted. They definitely need those 3. I know, Janice, you can say it much more heartfelt than I can.
Well, I just don't want to misrepresent the situation. I mean, South County is just one of our locations. They happened to lose 3 clinicians at one time, and that created a significant need. We have the same scenario now on another team in our Bend clinic. All of our outpatient teams are extremely busy. We have first treatment appointments out until August. Most clinicians have caseloads of over 55 into the 60s, and in some cases 70s. So I don't want to sort of represent South County as something unique. This is an overarching issue for us, and we're just feeling really hopeful that, at some point the issue of the reduction is addressed in such a way that we're able to fill vacancies where there's critical need, and that's frankly across the agency. So it's a much broader issue than just one position in South County.
Have we authorized any of the 3?
2 of the 3 were
2
authorized.
of the 3, yes.
And have they been hired? I thought you had candidates that you'd offered the jobs to?
We have 2 candidates who wwe offered, and they are now officially hired. Just know that we have multiple vacancies. So we have multiple vacancies across the agency because we have a large staff. So.
I support getting that position filled. That building was redeveloped for this purpose, so there'd be a entryway and meeting rooms and the service center basically for Southern Deschutes County. So we have momentum down there. So yeah, getting it staffed up appropriately or in a balanced fashion is where we should be. So I'm showing enthusiastic support for getting that next position filled. And thanks, Janice, for explaining the big picture around all the locations.
So Janice, you said Bend also, you have an issue in Bend?
So we have a number of vacancies on teams, and I think I'm just concerned that focusing on South County sort of misses the larger picture, which is that we have regularly, because we are large, vacancies on teams where being short-staffed really begins to create service impact. So we have a team currently at the Bend Clinic that just lost 3 clinicians, and that means that there's actually only 4 behavioral health specialists left on that team, so it virtually cuts that team's capacity in half. That was the situation we were in South County several weeks ago, which we've been discussing. So it's unusual to have that many people leave at once, frankly, but we are large enough that we frequently have vacancies. So when we're not able to move forward with hiring, it just creates hardships for teams and also can impact our service levels and meeting our metrics on our contracts and our grants. So it's a broader issue.
So isn't there any overlap? I mean, we're developing, like I said earlier today, we had, in 17, we put in a CCBHC program that brought in 20 people.
Yes.
And then we're bringing in a wraparound, another 8 people. And then we're bringing in the stabilization with whatever we've already added plus 11 more people. Don't any of those programs take some work off other teams? I mean, it just, this is only in 3 years we've done this, really.
Yeah.
And so I wonder who is thinking about, it's kind of the same question as the sheriff about when they reduce, they want more behavioral health people, but there's nothing changing on the corrections deputies. It's just more people. And if we're kind of in a lull right now. I guess we're growing, but economically, we'll see. I don't know.
If I can answer that question, when we received the original CCBHC demonstration grant, we were able to add a number of staff, and in that cohort, we were able to add direct service providing clinicians that are in the job classification called a behavioral health specialist 2. The reason that's important is they are really our case-carrying clinicians. So as we grow as a community and as a agency service population, they are really the people that carry the primary responsibility to provide treatment. The new grants that we've received are, interestingly, mostly grants that help us enhance the ancillary services associated with our cases. So we can hire peers, we can hire case managers, we have hired a couple of additional behavioral health specialists 2s, which did help us increase capacity. But a lot of these new grants really add the ability to wrap services around our more intensive clients. So the Stabilization Center is a really good example of an intensive service that helps us serve a crisis population. Incidentally, the Stabilization Center is likely in some ways to increase our numbers because folks who are served there ultimately will need ongoing clinical care, and that will become our service population. So I know that's a complicated answer. I hope I've been clear that it has added capacity to do some specialized kinds of work. It has not necessarily added direct service providing behavioral health specialists.
So some of the people that go through these programs, can't they also qualify for private
Oh, yes.
behavioral health counselors? So couldn't
Absolutely.
some of the ones to the stabilization not require another employee of the county, but help the people who have left the county and started their own practices? I mean,
so one of the things that our access team does, that's our intake specialist team, is they screen thousands of people literally every year to be seen in the community and not by us. So we look at folks when they call us, and we make an attempt either through an assessment or a screening to determine whether or not they need our level of care, because frankly, we are busy enough. We do not need extra clients. We are very busy just serving the 6,000 individuals that we serve every year. So we screen many, many individuals to go into the private sector and receive counseling services there. And in fact, because the panel of private sector providers was opened to OHP, that's possible even for our lower income clients. In the case of the Stabilization Center, the people we serve there are usually high enough acuity of symptoms that what they need is not necessarily available in the private sector. They need things like what I've been describing: case management, peer supports, medication management, psychiatric assessment and support services. Typically, they really do end up with us. Not always, but more often than not. I hope that answered your question.
Janice, could you give me the position numbers for the Bend office, the Bend clinic that you're working on? I was just trying to pull them up on here.
So I have a recommendation. I mean, I'm not really interested in doing all this. If Commissioner DeBone doesn't want to do any more, you have, more detail interest than I have about specific positions. Maybe you could come up with recommendations that you think would be good. And
Janice, will you send me those numbers? And we'll do
are you
that
okay
later.
with that?
Sure.
We can, because I'll look through the list too and talk to Eric about, I mean, I feel like we have some goals to set that are just kind of, if we can get that done.
Well, when we do need employees, it just seems like it takes a lot longer to get a new employee in the program than, and, when we're short. So that's kind of where I worry about. Even though the unemployment, what is it, 12% for Deschutes County today?
Well, I think people leave to go into private practice because they.
Right, they get their experience and then they can leave and go into private.
That's true in a lot of businesses, and I think it's just always going to be that way. We're different. It's a different employer base really or something. It's like when you're a home builder, you end up hiring these project managers that have a lot of skill, and they stay there until they know the community and have something going, and then they go out on their own and build houses. And that's just how it works, and you lose some of the best people. So I just don't think that's going to solve itself as a government entity. I don't know. I just think we should, if you have stuff, we could share it, and
I'll share mine,
Does that work?
you make your
Does
calls.
that work all right with you?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
We'll schedule this for next Monday or Wednesday.
Wednesday'd probably be better.
Yeah, I'm going to be gone tomorrow and Friday, so that'd be good.
Wednesday.
I hope you're not going somewhere, a hot spot. We'll have to put you in quarantine.
Well, I'm going to Hood River, so maybe.
Oh, gosh.
Never know. I hope I'm going to see my stepmom for the first time in 7 months.
Okay.
So, Commissioner, just to close the loop, I've sent Eric and Kathleen the list of positions that we prioritized, and I'm happy to share that with you. And again, just really hopeful we can move beyond this current status so that we're not doing these as one-offs. Takes a lot of staff time and energy.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you, Commissioners. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, all right, so now we're going to go to our item number 23 on our agenda, the Bend Core Urban Renewal District and board signature of the resolution.
Thank you, Commissioners. So yesterday, I submitted to you an updated resolution that's got a couple new paragraphs in there. We tried to reflect your comments from Monday. Also, there were some questions, some specific questions on the existing tax districts. So we submitted to you a new table that, I can put my hands on it here. There it is.
One?
No, that is, I haven't gotten to that one yet.
Oh.
This table, it looks like that. It's on a landscape piece of paper. It's got the 5 existing urban renewal districts. So that one has the start date, the duration, the maximum debt for each of the existing 5 urban renewal districts, 2 in Bend, one each in Redmond, Sisters, and Lapine. So just as background information on what their, when they were set up and the maximum debt, which equates to their project list. And then this is the other new one, Commissioner Henderson, you had asked about that. What percentage of the proposed core area, out of the entire city of Bend, taxing area, that area represents? So that's based on the existing or current tax levy within the boundaries of the proposed core area. Obviously, that would project to increase much more rapidly if the district was adopted, but so it's about 3.3% of the total taxing area.
So
It actually says 3.8%, the bottom.
Overall, there's a little bit of quirk, and
Yes.
I can't swear that these are surgically precise numbers because we got a couple different tax years that we're working under. IT pulled for me the 2019 tax year, and then you've got some.
He's talking about the 3.3 up here under Deschutes County total.
Okay, yes.
So you're saying the amount that we would be foregoing in this urban district, urban area, would be 3.3% of what we currently get cumulatively within the city boundaries. Is that essentially what we're saying? About 466,000 of 14 million?
Yeah, and actually that number's a coincidence. The 3.3%, and that was in the original memo that you saw on Monday. If you took all of for countywide, including the incorporated cities, the 5 existing urban renewal districts, and added to them the 2 that are being proposed, one in Bend and then the South Highway 97 proposed district in Redmond, added those together roughly against all the other tax lots in the county, that's about 3.3%. Coincidentally, the core area of Bend also represents 3.3% of the city of Bend overall taxing area.
Just so happens to. Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't even, But it's, well, that was one of the observations I had about your first chart. I was surprised. I mean, all of these passed before I was in office, so I didn't really know. I mean, other than reading about it in the paper, I knew about Juniper Ridge because it was so involved, but I didn't even know there was a $52 million one at Murphy Crossing. I don't even know what is part of that other than those 2 roundabouts they built and maybe improving it. But I was surprised how big the Redmond was.
Yeah, well,
120 million.
You would expect with the high value of the properties that exist downtown, the dense development that's
in Redmond.
Yeah.
Right. And is it the same? I mean, is it the whole core area of Redmond basically?
Pretty much.
Fifth and Sixth Streets.
The main drag there with commercial on either side extends several blocks either way.
That goes back, 95.
And that one's been amended a number of times. I looked at the recent report. That's why it's got sort of a weird duration, because it's been updated and extended. So that one's kind of a living, breathing creature there.
So when it was amended in 19, did they add on additional time?
Yes.
They did?
Yeah. I didn't go there, and it's been amended multiple times. I didn't go through each one, but the most recent tax report, each urban renewal district produces an annual report that goes to the taxing entities, and they talk about the new parameters in terms of their projects done in the last year, their maximum indebtedness, the duration, and so forth. And the one for Redmond referenced in the most recent amendment, and then noted the new maximum indebtedness number and the new expiration date. So the amendments to the resolution basically discuss the if the Urban Renewal Agency were willing to do several things. Number one, shrink the duration from 30 to 20 years, to limit the type of projects that are proposed to be undertaken within that district to traditional municipal infrastructure, sewer, water, roads. That the and consequently reduces the overall valuation or the tax growth that would be sequestered by the Urban Renewal District, then the Board of County Commissioners may support it, might support it. So that, obviously, all that language is subject to your review and tinkering. And then as you saw today, the sheriff has sent a separate letter to the City of Bend, to the Urban Renewal District, registering his concerns over the proposed district.
Yes, to quote it, referring to Murphy and Juniper, these projects have underperformed and have not fulfilled the projections of the city. That's quoting his letter.
I've been working with Carrie Coliani and the Sheriff's Office all along here, and sharing reports and such that we've produced in our office, and he's kind of collaborated with us too and let us know where the sheriff's at in this. So it's sort of been working together, parallel it in any way.
So thank you very much for the next paragraph that was added. So I don't know that we're in a good spot where we say we might be able to support in the future, because this is kind of our one shot. And this was pointed out after our last discussion, the fact that the ORS defines either support or opposition, and it's not a negotiation. So I really like the content here, talking about basic services, streets, sidewalks, green spaces, because I think sewer and water are generally different from this. I don't know that there's a need for sewer and water infrastructure in the core of Bend, because that's a bigger city issue. So I'm still in an opposition position, and I don't know that I conclude that it's a negotiation. So, and this is from our meeting last time. So the section 2 items, maybe we bring it back to a whereas, whereas tax increment financing, a vision for the current governing body would be tax increment financing for streets, green space, and sidewalks, or, as I say, I'm hesitant to say water and sewer.
And why are you hesitant to say sewer and water?
Well, I think it's there already. I mean, this is the core of the downtown. So we'd have to go back, and were there big line items for water and sewer infrastructure? Because there's buildings on all blocks already, so there must be water and sewer infrastructure there. So I just don't think that's a big part of these expenses.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought what you were saying is take the fluff out of it and get to the real things we need to make it a more developable neighborhood. Don't spend public money to make it so private developers can build buildings, but the public's created all the other stuff, all the niceness, amenities inside, things that cost, but they get the benefit of the building they build and profit from that. So
actually, if I might, Commissioner DeBone, on your question, actually sewer and water is a sizable percentage of their project list. We have their list of projects. Just for example, sewer system upgrades is $3.5 million. Stormwater system, $5.2 million. Water system upgrades is $1 million. Undergrounding of overhead utilities is $16.8 million. So
yeah,
I think those.
Well, and that is okay though. I mean, I was just referring to, utilities instead of calling water and sewer out. So yeah, that's fine. And those aren't the big numbers. I think there's, other line items in there that are bigger. As I say, I have the paperwork here in front of me. I don't know where to look right now.
So, yeah, as I said the other day, I think of the three things that the city has done as a urban renewal district, this is the one actually, to me, that has the most promise in terms of something happening, because it's actually it's an expansion of downtown, essentially. It'll do better than, I thought there was fundamental problems both with, as I mentioned last week, location, and then, it's very hard for the public to develop things. And so Juniper Ridge had that, and then I never, like, the fact that I'm not, Murphy Crossing really isn't, they're making it an area, but it wasn't so much of an area to start with. So this one and if you look at the map I found somewhere, I don't know if it's something that we got on this or we got it another meeting, but from the Redmond, when they do their report, their Urban Renewal Agency report that we got, it's pretty good. It tells what they're doing and what they've achieved, and I could see this kind of thing happening in this area, so I like that. I'm just worried about the price tag to us. I mean, the county will, in the long run, will get business investment from it, I think, or will, just like downtown Redmond has made it a nicer place, this would be a good thing. I guess I would go with the shorter term, and our recommendation would be shorter term and even a smaller space, because we already have two other areas in Bend. So.
And that's what we've concluded a few times is
the
short
so
period
I'd go
of
with
time.
that, but I don't want to be. Yeah, I don't know if you either have to be. I think Dave was saying we had to be for it or against it or something.
Didn't he?
Yeah, Dave helped with the language here, so he's on the line. I don't know if he can weigh in on the appropriateness of the new language.
Oh, that's right, he did. He says we oppose the UR plan as submitted however we.
Very clearly that the governing body shall adopt resolutions in support of or opposition to the plan.
And he suggested we use the words, we oppose the UR plan as submitted, however we support the UR plan if amended as follows. So that's what you've done, right? Well, I like the amendments. The only one I would add is maybe in terms of the size of it also. Maybe not to bite off quite that big a chunk. So that was in that last paragraph too. The duration of the district was reduced from 30 to 20 years. And the area was, I don't remember how many acres are in this proposal, but
600 and some.
reduced more to to an area like 400 acres or something. Because that's one reason it takes so long, is they make these massive areas.
And the vision of investing in that area is wonderful. We're in a spot as the governing body representing the full geographic area of Deschutes County, where we're shifting, tax payments from the greater area to this area, just by taking them out for those 30 years is the proposal.
20 years.
That's what we'd like to see. So that's really the crux of it, because nobody would be opposed to a wonderful, vibrant area that had, a lot more, activity. But it's just transferring those tax payments from the greater county for this investment.
It is fascinating because it is 637.15 acres, and the fact that it's only 3.3% of our revenue. It's not what we came up, or they would be taking from us on an annual basis.
Well, it's actually 3.3% is the cumulative take of all 5 existing plus the 2 proposed. So this one is clearly the largest, so it's probably more on the, probably half that by itself or a little less. But yeah, it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not large, but it by itself nevertheless is a pretty large chunk of money into the future.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, so the next ask is going to be Redmond's transportation one. So I guess I'm wondering, Commissioner DeBone, do you think that that's going to be a good approach, or do you think that's not a good thing either?
What was that? The
On the
transportation
Redmond,
bond?
they're asking
Oh,
for
the
an
Redmond.
urban renewal district also, right behind this, and so, and they've got one now.
Yeah, well, we're probably naturally in a spot where if I was a city councilor, I like the idea, but if we're county commissioners, it just looks like they're taking, carving out a little bit of our tax base for investment in their footprint. So, I mean, we're just naturally in a spot where it doesn't look the same. So, opposition is a statement. We really don't have the authority to stop it if the governing body wants to proceed. This is a tool that's in the state of Oregon. You get the planners involved envisioning what great things could be done if we just had X millions of dollars, and then it just starts to get a life of its own. I don't know that I would need to be convinced that I had to support it. It is what it is.
So, Commissioner,
State legislature could change the lay of the land here.
and they have. So there's an inherent little bit of a conflict between taxing districts and cities. When these have been created, and this tool has been around for a long time. They were severely limited, if not, or shrunk, if not eliminated, the scope in California, and more recently in Oregon, the law was tightened to require that cities pay a little bit more attention to comments that they receive from taxing districts that are impacted by that. And that's reflected in the process that's in front of you now that kind of sets up a formal means and requirement that cities acknowledge and respond to any comments that come in from taxing districts that are affected by these. It doesn't say they can't move forward, but it tightens it slightly by formalizing a requirement that they acknowledge and respond to concerns that are raised.
So, as I say, the Section 2 does have the content that I've come to a conclusion I'd like to get out there. Maybe it's a whereas, and it's just a simple Section 1 opposition statement. That's what we could, if we all three agree.
So there is a whereas in addition to the new Section 2. There's a new whereas at the bottom of page 1 that says very similar things. And the premise of the resolution is opposition, as Dave has pointed out. That's what we're, we have to pick one or the other. So it opposes the proposed district, but it's got a however in there that says if you were to reduce the scope in several different ways, then, that'd be a good thing. But I don't think that changes from the overall premise of opposition. And I guess Dave can correct me if I'm incorrect there.
Dave, is Tom correct?
Yes, Commissioner Tom articulated that correctly. The city, upon receiving a resolution in opposition, will have to consider it and acknowledge it in the sense that that they'll have to agree to move forward either with the existing plan or with a modified plan. But they do need to acknowledge it, and so you'll definitely get their attention with the resolution in opposition, as I suspect the sheriff's letter today will and has gotten their attention as well. So they're going to have to at least speak to it. But Tom's absolutely right. The statute's such that they can still move forward as a matter of legality, despite the counties, the taxing districts voicing the opposition. Yes, the whereas that was added certainly was an attempt to get at some of the concerns the commissioners had, and Section 2 there in the now therefore portion of it is just expanding on that. So if the board were inclined to proceed with the opposition, but give this sort of heads up that this would be a little more palatable, it could very well be that the whereas that was added, that suffices for that, and you could just get rid of that Section 2 if you wanted to.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, as I say, I was starting from the back and reading on the section 2, thinking of a whereas, not even flipping back to the fact that it is there already. So I support the whereas, and I think we could remove the section 2 statement.
Yeah. I don't know,
You wanted to remove section 2? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, because of the whereas does have the statement of the same content.
I see, okay, gotcha.
I guess for me, there's an interrelationship between the county, so to speak, the rural parts of the county, and the cities within it. And we, just like when I do things in the county, I want to make sure, I want the people in the city to know why they benefit from that. In the same way here to me. And so I look at Redmond, and I don't know if it's been cost effective, but they've definitely upped their community to a point where it's more desirable, and everybody in the county uses the cities. So I think we benefit in the short run by improvement throughout the county by a better Bend. And so to me, I'm not necessarily against the idea, and I just think that the two that Bend has done are kind of distinguishable. They're that's what the city apparently chose to do, but it was certain city councils. I mean, there were people that opposed Juniper Ridge when it was done, and they had the reasons they opposed it are things that turned out to be true, I think. But that city council picked that in 2005, and then there's this Murphy Crossing. I don't know why. I actually don't know why they did that, but the place where you do urban renewal is this area, and I have confidence that a lot of the city people involved with this would do a good job. I think my problem is that I wish there was, I mean, I don't really get, it doesn't solve housing affordability if they just build more apartments and multifamily stuff. It's not so the city focuses so much energy on projects like this, and the price tags are so high that's what I have a problem with, is what they spend. And so I like section 2, or I could, as we talk it out, I do think we got our money back in a way. We don't get it now, but we get it over the time because we get the higher tax base. I just like the shortening of the time and the smaller area, since they've already got 2 other areas that are in it. But I don't know.
Well, I'm comfortable with pretty much all the words in here now. So yeah, it's just what's the final package look like?
Isn't this due today?
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Today, the 20th, or it's tomorrow, yeah, whatever. 22nd?
23rd.
Tomorrow.
Okay. Well, all right, folks.
One of the problems I had was calling all that area blight. I mean, there's some that I would call, but like Greenwood, I don't think is blight. The nice buildings, nice, but I see that they must have used that same language in Redmond, right? They have to call it blight.
That's
So it's
what
just
they're
a
fixing.
term of art almost in that sense, yeah.
So you're suggesting to keep section 2 in?
Yeah.
I would keep it in.
So then the word appropriately, we I propose to remove the amount of tax revenue redirected from countywide taxing districts is reduced in cost and scope instead of appropriately, because that's such a subjective statement. Just reduce it is the request.
So you're saying go back, which reduces?
Just remove the word appropriately.
Okay. Okay.
Just one word change.
So, I'm fine with that. Just getting back to Commissioner Henderson's comment earlier, one proposed way we could reword this would be, which reduces the amount of tax revenue redirected from countywide taxing districts by focusing on traditional municipal infrastructure, reducing the size of the proposed boundary would be new, and reducing the duration of the district from 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
So on. So that incorporates that additional reduction parameter in the scope, and we could put that both in the whereas as well as section 2 if you wanted to keep them both.
And that's good.
I just feel like with their track record, this might be the perfect place for them to actually improve, but really reducing it from 637 acres might not be a bad idea. And then I would think that the next governing body, when they came back to do another project, would be so much more willing to take on the risk of the lost revenue. Because right now, when you look at, Juniper, and you look at Murphy, and you go, well, okay. I think we have to be a bit more thoughtful in today's world.
We've never really had a presentation on Murphy. I don't even know.
Yeah, that one. Well, that one goes way back.
I'm surprised it's. Was it
There is an
$15?
annual. There is an annual report on it. I saw.
There is an annual report.
Yeah.
Well, with the proposed changes, I'll make a motion that we approve a resolution. Are we ready for that? 2020-051 in opposition of the proposed core area TIF plan in Bend.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Any further discussion?
I don't like the word redirect money. It reminds me of reimagining police law enforcement. That whole thing of I don't know if that's the only word we have, but it just seems like they're not.
It's the action, though, I think. It caps it and redirects the future growth.
It's definitely a redirection. Any further discussion then? Okay. Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Henderson?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, the chair votes yes. So do we need to have this unanimous?
Doesn't have to be. I mean, what I could do, if you'd like, I can go upstairs and make these changes and bring you back a clean version if you want to go
Sure.
on to one of your executive sessions or something and finalize the vote then.
That'd be great.
Still see the smoke coming out of Commissioner Henderson's ears over there. I don't know if you want to.
Well, I don't know what. It's on one side, I'm kind of caught in the middle because I actually think Bend it has some real good potential, and we're just like we're going to be asked to look at the Redmond one soon, and I think that has some potential, and so.
I see this as a conversation starter. The moment we can have 5 or 7 city councilors paying attention saying, oh, is that what we're doing? Because, it really does look like a lot of money being redirected, and 30 years is such a long time. So it's a conversation starter by putting this out.
And it is shocking.
Well, do you think everybody will be conversing with us? Do they?
It's an opportunity for a conversation starter.
An opportunity for one.
Yeah, no, I agree. Maybe nobody will listen. Yeah.
You had counselors that came to your work sessions earlier this year to kind of speak to it directly.
In January.
Councilor Livingstone and Councilor Piper were both here to kind of speak to try and sell you on it and to speak up to its benefits. So I would hope that they would register,
But we've never talked to them more about, like, if you really want to know what we think you should lower the amount, lower the years, then we'd be, more for it, but nobody's asked.
Not specifically, but they've certainly thrown it out there for comment for some time.
Okay, so Tom, you're going to do that. You'll bring it back.
You do that way I can smoke out my ears some more.
Okay, so we're now at other items. There was also a letter written to the county fairs to Rob Wagner and Pam Marsh, the co-chairs of the Ways and Means, on funding. If they take away the fair funding, they're really worried that this could be a bad precedent. And did you guys, apparently, Deschutes County wasn't listed with the, 15 counties that they have as examples, but I was thinking maybe we could do our own letter from Deschutes County or something. This was actually sent from the fair associations.
Yeah, I looked at that. So really what we could, the only way we really get at it is if we use Deschutes County as an example like they used all the other counties.
Right. And according to Candy, we have 250 to 300 auction lots, which is way lower than normal for this year for the 4-H, for the 4-H auction. And now, of course, she's having to redirect because, inside the rule got changed down to 100. So, but, she can move it. There's like a covered arena out there. There's also the big arena, but there's a covered arena too, which might, anyway.
Covered might qualify as an outdoor.
Right, it would be outdoors, but yeah. So I'm hoping that she can do something.
Well, I'm okay with the letter. I think
Okay.
it makes sense to do our own because it doesn't, we
Right.
could include a sentence about us in that
Right.
if they want to, but they've already signed that, it looks like.
Well, this came from Patrick Singh and, the head of the fairs.
Fair board, yeah.
Fair people, but I really think we should, Deschutes County, our fair is too important not to send a letter in with funding, so.
Commissioners, there was several items in the proposed rebalancing list that affect us. That was one.
Okay, what else?
We get about 52,000 annually as part of the fair assistance. So that's what our impact would be if that were eliminated. And we can certainly prepare a letter. The other one that really bothered me, I don't know if you picked up on it, was the PERS side account. There's some of that I'm not sure. We're chasing that down, but it's listed as if it's on the chopping block.
The PERS side account.
The matching funds.
Yeah, the 25%.
Yeah, that we.
Oh, I didn't see that. I haven't looked at that. That's the letter we just got, or the?
But I didn't see there was that Whitney forwarded the rebalancing.
Oh, I didn't read it. Yeah. I remember seeing it.
So there was.
I'm not surprised.
So we're noodling through that. So I'd probably suggest one of our meetings next week that we kind of go through, and if you want to advocate certainly on behalf of more than just the fair, which is, I agree, I would.
That's 52,000, and the other one could be millions.
Potentially, if it's actually what it looks like, there's only a sentence there that's not really described in any detail as far as what the impacts are. But that was certainly one that we noted in that list.
Was there anything else, Tom?
Most of certainly they, so it's broken down into things they want to preserve first,
right.
And then there's an itemized list of things that they think are for discussion, for cutting. And most of the things, certainly the community corrections is a big chunk that we get from the state. That was identified as a priority to preserve. Health, both on the public behavioral, it was sort of a mix in that they supported certain things, I think was the terminology, and other things, there are some items from that list. So it appears that most of what would affect us is preserved, but I haven't gone through the list in detail. So those are the biggest chunks of state money that we received that were at risk.
Okay, well, then we should work on that so we can.
Yeah,
get
no,
that
we'll
letter.
set that up for next week for sure.
Okay, well, yes, definitely. That is amazing. Oh, our COVID number today was 8. We've been averaging about 7 a day.
Except
Like-
for the weekend, we had like
Well-
14 and 15 and stuff.
Yes, yes, but that was some of the long-term, I think, went into that. So, yeah, we went up, so,
Very much
It was-
more than 2 or 3. when
I
we're
know.
only doing 300 tests.
Before I run off upstairs, there was one other item. You all got a letter from the Crosswater Homeowners Association
oh, yes.
yesterday or the day before with some concerns regarding Harper Bridge. They'd like to have a joint meeting with you, their board of directors. So I just wanted to alert you to that. You don't have to decide what you want to do today, but perhaps by next week we can have a discussion on what you'd like to do there. We're happy to set up a joint meeting. Chris and I went and spoke to their HOA board 2 years ago, I think, the year before. We made the improvements there, so but we can certainly set that up if you'd like to.
I had sent the email on about the boys jumping off the bridge into the water. And so did you see the email somebody sent? They'd gone there like 3 times, and I guess Chris said it's clearly posted, do not jump off the bridge, of
Well, and
course.
it's clearly illegal, too, regardless of, or for any bridge in the county, and which is a law enforcement,
Well, these are kids. What do you?
And they haven't
I know
gone to.
people that have kids that have jumped off the Healy Bridge when they're not supposed, and the response was, well, we wanted to. So anyway,
Well, I'd been telling Shane because the parking there got to be a mess, and I said, Shane, you have to.
this year?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Right,
like on
last
the
year was so good. Oh, yeah.
4th of July.
This is part of that whole, but it's just something to do. you
Right.
know, Now, there's probably a lot of use there. Okay.
So,
Well,
and
I
so
mean,
I
a lot
said, you
of
have to
them.
enforce it.
And we're working on, speaking of coming meetings, we're also working on a date for the meeting on Veterans Village, right?
Yeah.
We've talked.
Actually, we agreed on a date. It's I believe, the 17th.
Of August? Oh, okay, so we got some time to prepare for it, okay.
Yeah, that's what
So I was
they're
gonna-
requested. And the cities, by the way, has confirmed that they'll participate as well.
Oh, good.
So it'll be like a work session? Oh, good.
We're seeing more floating activity. Little Deschutes is where I cross to get to my house, and you can tell it's more coordinated and larger groups is kind of what's happening. So it is an event to go on the river, and then a bunch of people are joining in. So it is different this year because of the size of the coordinated groups.
I talked to somebody this morning that had been at Elk Lake yesterday, or Monday. He says it was like a Saturday. It's a Monday, and the same kind of thing. People are just doing stuff,
Definitely.
Okay.
Any other items?
Well, I have to be somewhere at 4. We've got a couple of executive sessions, don't we?
Yes. So,
Do I need to be here for the annexation one?
Just based on what was. Oh.
Tom, do I need to be here for the annexation conversation? Is that an informational thing, or are we deciding it for sure today?
I'm not sure if there's a requested ask. There was, I think they're going to bring you up to speed on this has been going on for a while and has been a little dicey at times in terms of the transition roads, but I'm honestly, I'm not sure of the specific.
I'm just wondering if we could do that second. I was supposed to be somewhere at 4. We could still do do we have one executive or 2?
There's
3.
2 property. Christie was hoping to kind of
Oh, yeah.
on the Juniper Ridge access.
Did we do that first?
Your pleasure, sure.
sure.
And actually, Dave beat me to it. What you have before you is a revised
Yes.
resolution for
Okay, so-
Urban Renewal District.
So do you want to take a look at that? So was some kind of a decision made about our party in our waiting room then today?
On what?
person in our lobby? Was there a decision made on that?
Oh, yeah, I'll talk to you afterwards.
Okay, all right. Because I was going to buy him lunch, but then someone told me not to. Which I know is probably the right decision.
Okay. I'll vote yes.
Okay, yeah, excellent. That was really good. So,
That's teamwork.
okay, so we have 3 yes votes then. Thank you for doing that, Samantha. Bringing it down. Okay, so now are we okay to go into executive session? Okay, I need to give you time to go into executive. I will take that time to get up for. Go back to our regular meeting so I may adjourn it. Please. Yes, thank you very much. We are now going to adjourn our meeting of July 22nd, 2020 for Deschutes County Commissioners. Thank you for being with us today. The meeting is now adjourned.